Ex-wife cheated, got an STD, and now she's desperate for help after I became rich and successful. You've emerged victorious while I've suffered defeat. You walk away with property, money, and an upgraded partner. The hotel room is yours tonight, along with the arrangements I've made. Please don't return the gift. It would only remind you of your deceit. I'm driving home and have no desire to see you, him, or your associates again. Let me know when your team will collect your belongings. Anything unnecessary will be packed away, symbolizing the mess of our marriage. To quote my father in the Air Force, yay for me and screw you. I'm done serving you. Enjoy your journey. Your acting skills have earned it. 10 years later on a Wednesday morning, I awoke to banging. Rubbing sleep from my eyes, I checked the clock. 8:15 a.m. The noise persisted now at my front door. Who would knock at this hour? I slipped into my robe and slippers, heading downstairs where the knocking grew louder. Peering through the peephole, I saw a disheveled woman. Opening the door prepared to scold her, I recognized her, older, thinner, her once vibrant hair now tinged with gray. She smelled, her dress worn. She resembled homeless Daisy, who often lurked in the streets or underpasses. In disbelief, I questioned the woman who had once been my wife. "Yes, Mike, it's me. Can I come inside?" she pleaded desperately. "By the way, that's me, Mike Carpenter." "No," I replied, slamming the door in her face. Just then another knock echoed, accompanied by her sobs. "Please, Mike, I'm begging you, open the door." I flung the door open to prevent further pounding but remained in the doorway to block her entry. The neighbors already viewed me as peculiar. I didn't want to attract more attention by making a scene on the doorstep. "What do you want?" "I made it clear 10 years ago that I never want to see you again." "Never? What part of that didn't you understand? And why are you here?" "I thought you and Dr. Wonderful were living in Milwaukee." Regaining composure, Daisy wiped her tears and cast me the most longing glance I'd ever witnessed. "Can I come in? I'm hungry, tired, and need to use the restroom." "Please, I'll explain later," she implored, her feet shifting uneasily. With my experience as a teacher, I recognized the telltale signs of imminent urgency. I didn't want her relieving herself on my porch, so I reluctantly swung the door open, gesturing her inside with a silent invitation. "You remember where the bathroom is?" I scolded, a reminder that we once shared this home. "Hurry up." "Thanks," Daisy said, entering. She dropped her suitcase and dashed to the downstairs bathroom. I closed the door, went upstairs for a quick bathroom break, and returned downstairs, finding her still in the bathroom. I went to the kitchen, fired up my Keurig, and brewed coffee. By then, Daisy had returned. "Can I have a cup?" she pleaded. I paused. Torn between anger and restraint, I couldn't slap a woman, and I didn't want trouble. "Yeah, I'm not heartless," I replied, "but I'm not your servant either." So I relented, partly out of curiosity. "I don't have fancy stuff," I said, offering milk and sugar. "Black's fine," Daisy said gratefully. I handed her the cup, watching her trembling hands. "Why are you here?" I asked. "I've got nowhere else to go," she finally admitted. "I used up my last dime on cab fare." "What happened to your beloved Dr. Bruce?" I quipped sarcastically. "Dr. Bruce?" "It fell apart," she stuttered, avoiding my gaze. If my sarcasm had been any sharper, you could have sliced tile with it. I noticed her flinch. After the divorce, we tied the knot, but things soured when Bruce faced a massive medical malpractice lawsuit. Both of us lost our jobs and medical licenses, and we ended up losing everything. Bruce became abusive, blaming me for our situation. "One day I caught him cheating," Daisy tearfully recounted. "So he got a taste of his own medicine," I remarked wryly, remembering our own past drama. "But karma's a kicker, not fun." Daisy whimpered. "Just like it wasn't funny when you publicly tore me apart on our anniversary." I reminded her. "Do you realize it's the 10th anniversary of that night?" "No, I didn't know," Daisy murmured. "Did you report him to the cops?" I asked, showing some compassion. "No, too scared. But I did divorce him. Unfortunately, I was left with next to nothing after the split," Daisy explained. "I haven't eaten in 2 days." "What's your play here?" I questioned. "Sympathy? You might find it in the dictionary between crap and chiropractor." "I despise you. I loathe you as intensely as I once adored you," I snarled. "Now that your world's crumbling, you come crawling back to me. Where are your parents and friends now?" "They've all abandoned me," Daisy sobbed. "No surprises there," I scoffed bitterly. "Did you and the idiot have kids?" "No, never did. Turns out Bruce is infertile. For some reason he blames me for that too," she spat bitterly. "At least the gene pool's safe from you too," I remarked wryly. "Guess something good came from that mess." She wrinkled her nose at me. "What happened to you, Mike? You used to be so caring, so kind." Anger morphed into fury and I squeezed my eyes shut. "You want to know what happened? Look in the mirror. You happened. Thanks to you, I'm incapable of love and trust." "The nice guy finished last," I growled. But I thought you'd move on, find someone else, Daisy wheezed wide-eyed. Get real. After what you did, you never once hinted I was just a fallback for you. I thought we had something solid, but you lied. 13 damn years, 10 as husband and wife. Do you think I can trust anyone after that? I took a deep breath. And how many women do you think would want damaged goods? Not that there was a line, I muttered to myself. Still, not a single one came along. So, are you surprised I've turned into a recluse after a decade of licking my wounds? I suppose not, Daisy admitted sheepishly, lowering her gaze. And here you are. What do you want from me, shelter? Care while you wait for Prince Charming to stroll back in? I hoped you'd let me stay just until I get back on my feet, she pleaded. There's a shelter downtown, I pointed out. That's what they're for. That's where my taxes go, to keep people like you off the streets. I tried, but they were full, Daisy confessed. Even the YWCA and the big church downtown had no room. Please, Mike, I'm begging you. I'll do anything, cook, clean, whatever you need. I wanted to lash out, but I held back, glaring at her. She visibly recoiled. What makes you think I'd want you near me? To me, you're contaminated, a walking hazard, I hissed. And then it dawned on me. You've been attempting to sell yourself, I remarked. She lowered her head shyly, tears dripping onto the table as she nodded. How do I appear? No takers, she questioned. I studied her closely before replying. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Perhaps I should depart. Perhaps I should simply fade away and perish in some, Daisy cried. No one desires me anyhow. I watched her sobbing at the kitchen table, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Despite my strong hatred for her, seeing her like this after all these years was jarring. And then there was Bruce, the dirtbag who had taken her from me to mistreat her. My contempt for him was growing. Raised never to use violence against women, I struggled with conflicting emotions. Taking a reluctant breath, I suggested we eat first. Daisy agreed, expressing her hunger. I prepared scrambled eggs and bacon, recalling how Daisy used to make them. Her eyes lit up when I served her, grateful for the cheese on the eggs. As she ate voraciously, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. When she finished, she thanked me for the meal and praised my cooking. She declined more food but asked for another cup of coffee. Sure, I replied, taking her cup. When I returned, she sipped her coffee and seemed to feel better, a little. The food helped, she admitted. Good. The shower might help more, I suggested bluntly. No offense, but you stink. Daisy's face fell. I'm sorry, can I use your shower, please? You know where it is, I said. Towels are where they always are. My robe will be on the door. Don't put it back on after your shower. You can use the washer and dryer for your clothes. As she disappeared into the bathroom, I grumbled about cleaning, then washed dishes, went upstairs to get ready, and reflected on Daisy's departure with Bruce, the betrayal that devastated me. Counseling helped, and I poured my feelings into writing, eventually publishing a book about my experience, bringing some closure. Another factor in maintaining my sanity was my involvement in martial arts. Initially, two senseis urged me to quit due to my intensity during sparring. However, I found guidance from a retired Marine at the community center. Unlike others, he remained composed during our sessions, teaching me to channel my emotions into controlled strikes rather than letting them dictate my actions. It was a challenging skill to master, as evidenced by the bruises I accumulated. Meeting Daisy again took me by surprise, especially seeing her health decline. I wondered if she was sick. Oddly, my anger shifted toward Bruce. Even though I initially wanted to push Daisy away, I hesitated. What if something happened to her? Could I handle the aftermath? The idea of worsening my emotional state and facing potential legal issues wasn't appealing. I decided to get another perspective and called my mom. Morning, Mike, she greeted cheerfully. What's on your mind? Skipping the usual chit-chat, I blurted out, guess who showed up this morning? Now you got me curious. Who? She asked. Daisy, I confessed. I heard her sigh. What's the deal? What does she want? She probed. I recounted Daisy's situation and what she told me. Mom, she looks awful. My gut says I should kick her out, but... You'd regret it if something happened to her, Mom predicted, echoing my worry. Yeah, you're probably right. Plus, she treated Bruce terribly, I added. I know she hurt you deeply, Mom acknowledged, but maybe hearing her out is the wise move. How about I come over later? Knowing Mom's talent for unraveling things, I agreed. Sounds good, Mom. Your input would be invaluable. Let me handle it for now, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, Mom. I really appreciate it, I expressed gratefully. We wrapped up our chat, and I tended to my chores. Slipping into my usual summer gear of a tee and jeans, I went downstairs. Daisy had already started laundry, wearing my old robe and slippers as she waited for me in the living room. I didn't bother to check if she had anything on underneath. The robe was tightly tied, showing dark stains on her legs. Though she smelled better, she didn't look any better. "Want a coffee refill?" I offered. "Yes, please," she accepted. Pouring another cup, I joined her as she sipped. Her shaky hands caught my eye. "Thanks," she mumbled. "I'll leave once my clothes are done," she added. "No hurry," I assured her. "I do have some questions if you don't mind," I continued. "Sure," Daisy agreed. "Bruce faced malpractice claims. Weren't doctors like him insured?" I asked. "They were, but it turned into a class action. Even though most claims were baseless, the insurance refused coverage due to many judgments against him," Daisy clarified. "Some claims were proven true?" I probed. "The unproven ones were dismissed due to lack of evidence," she explained. "But the damage was done. We lost our jobs and licenses." "Didn't you have 401 Ks?" I questioned. Surprised. "Yes, we did. We lived off them for a year, paying hefty penalties, but we lost everything," Daisy lamented. "What's Bruce doing now?" I chuckled, recalling his earlier dreams. "He works as a parking attendant, making about $16 an hour," she revealed. "And your plans?" I redirected. "I thought about office work in the medical field. Despite losing my nursing license, I'm hopeful," Daisy replied quietly. "Best of luck," I offered. "Transportation and housing," I pressed. "I can take the bus or walk," she sighed. "I'll figure something out, but it takes money," she acknowledged. "And you don't have any," I noted. "Expected me to support you until you bounce back, huh?" I took a gamble with the question. "Yes," Daisy admitted. "I get I'm not owed anything, but I hoped, given what I sacrificed in the divorce, you might show some kindness. My infatuation blinded me to your struggles. Now I see assuming was a mistake." "You're right, I don't owe you," I affirmed. She seemed defeated, but I sighed and added, "But I'm not heartless. You clearly need help. My mom's on her way. She wants to talk before I decide." "Of course," Daisy replied, visibly relieved. "Your mom's always meant a lot to me and she adored you," I noted. Then, unexpectedly, she said, "Despite it all, Mom still cared for you." "Cared?" Daisy asked, surprised. "Yes. So you need to be brutally honest with her, understand?" "I do, I promise, honesty," Daisy assured. "And Mike?" "What?" I asked. "Thank you, genuinely, for everything," Daisy expressed. "Hold off on the thanks," I cautioned. Just then, the doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole, seeing my mom, so I greeted her with a hug as I let her in. "Daisy, goodness, has it really been 10 years?" my mom exclaimed, spotting Daisy in my old robe. Both women hugged and exchanged kisses. "It's nice to see you again, Lorraine," Daisy replied. "Mike, dear, why don't you give us some girl time?" my mom suggested. Knowing she wanted privacy, I headed to my home office, closing the door. I surfed the web, looking into the malpractice lawsuit against Dr. Bruce Williams. After some searching, I stumbled upon troubling information. Bruce had reportedly diagnosed around 97% of his 2,000 patients with epilepsy over 4 years. However, many children were misdiagnosed or over-medicated, leading to unnecessary treatments and procedures. Daisy was often implicated as an accomplice. The hospital had to refund $300,000 for improper billing, prompting their termination and license revocation. Reading this, I was appalled. Bruce seemed to be the ringleader, with Daisy following his lead. My mother interrupted, expressing concern about Daisy's health and suggesting a visit to Dr. McGregor. Her grave tone weighed heavily on me. Terry McGregor had been our family doctor for years, and Mom had worked for him until retiring recently. Why, Mom?" I pondered. "I can't diagnose, but I've seen many cancer cases in women. I bet she needs urgent medical attention, but she didn't stop there." "I know Daisy has strained your bond, and I understand," Mom admitted. "But if she's dealing with health issues, we should help. It's the right thing." She gave me a small, lopsided smile. "I never said being a Christian was easy, did I? Plus, Michael James Carpenter, your father and I didn't raise you to be cold-hearted, did we?" I wrinkled my nose, returning her smile, and shook my head. "So," she went on, "I called Dr. McGregor. He'll see her today and run tests. If they find anything, they'll refer her to a specialist and assist with Medicaid. She'll change, and I'll drive her," Mom decided. "You can't afford that," I objected. "Here, take this." I handed her 2 $100 bills. "Thanks, Mike. You're a good son," she acknowledged. "Just so we're clear, I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing it because of the values you taught me." "That doesn't mean I forgive her or take her back," I asserted firmly. "Got it," Mom replied quietly. An awkward silence hung in the air. "Did she mention that idiot Bruce assaulted her?" I finally asked. "Yes, she did," Mom confirmed, her face neutral, her voice steady. I nodded briskly. "That scoundrel needs consequences," I thought. Another tense silence followed. "Keep me updated," I instructed. "I will," Mom assured, kissing my forehead before leaving. Exiting my office, I saw Daisy in a different outfit, still worn but clean. "Thanks for breakfast," she murmured timidly. "You're welcome," I replied stiffly. After they left, I locked up and grabbed more coffee, researching Wisconsin's laws on spousal abuse. Sadly, I found the time limit for prosecution was discouraging. Unsure of when Bruce attacked Daisy, I doubted the authorities could act. Feeling frustrated, I briefly considered taking matters into my own hands. To clear my head, I changed and rode my stationary bike, pushing myself through a tough workout. Over the years, I had gone from unfit to fit, sticking to a regular exercise routine. Afterward, feeling refreshed, I showered, dressed, and had a light lunch while catching up on the news. By the time I listened to Mom's message, it was mid-afternoon. "Was wondering where you guys were," I said as I answered the phone. "Just finished with Dr. McGregor," Mom replied wearily. Judging by her tone, Daisy wasn't nearby. "Any updates?" I asked. "McGregor's concerned about Daisy. Test results suggest cervical cancer. He's arranged an appointment with an oncologist for Friday. She's applied for Medicaid and emergency aid. McGregor also suspects physical abuse," Mom disclosed. "We're aware," I acknowledged. She mentioned not eating. Mom continued, her concern evident. "But McGregor thinks it's more severe, lacking essential nutrients." Seeing her worry, I nodded. "It's late. I'll take her for a meal. Grab essentials in her suitcase. She should stay with me." "We need to talk," Mom suggested. "Sounds like a plan," I agreed. "Keep me posted." "Love you," Mom said. "Love you too," I replied. About 3 hours later, they were on their way. We settled in the study while Daisy packed. "Sorry for the delay," Mom began. "No worries," I said. "What's the plan?" "Caring for Daisy till her appointment. She still cares for you." "Wanted you to know," Mom explained. "No reconciliation, not after her lies and infidelity," I said firmly. "Understood," Mom replied. "She thinks she can win you back," Mom revealed. "Out of the question," I asserted. "Besides, I've changed." "I miss the old you," Mom admitted. "Can you join us for dinner on Friday?" she asked. "I'll make lasagna." "Absolutely," I agreed. "Your lasagna always brings a smile." We hugged and returned to the front room where Daisy was waiting with her suitcase. "I'll stay with your mom, if that's okay," she said weakly. "That's up to her," I replied, noticing my mom's expression. "Thanks for breakfast and for listening," Daisy said tearfully. "You're welcome," I nodded. "Don't forget about dinner on Friday," my mom reminded unnecessarily. "I'll be there, I promise," I assured her. Over the next 2 days, I kept busy with work and household chores. With school out for summer, I had to tackle curriculum planning and home maintenance. I trusted my mom to take care of Daisy, knowing her resourcefulness in navigating challenges. Finally, Friday arrived. After a shower, I picked up wine and headed to my mom's for lasagna. Arriving at 6:15, Daisy greeted me and led me inside. Mom was busy in the kitchen, and Daisy appeared on the verge of tears. I thanked Daisy as I entered the kitchen, and Mom's face lit up at the sight of the wine. We sat down to enjoy the meal, though Daisy seemed visibly distressed. "How did things go today?" I finally inquired. "We managed to get Daisy's application approved," Mom reported. "Thank goodness for this newfangled internet system. I wish they'd had it when I retired." Observing her forced optimism, I sought reassurance. "So Daisy's medical costs will be covered?" "Yes, and she'll get a monthly allowance from the state. Since she'll be living here, she won't need much," Mom confirmed. "They're pursuing child support, but it's like squeezing blood from a turnip," I muttered grimly. "That's good," I replied. "And the oncologist?" Daisy's expression darkened, signaling ominous news. "They found stage 4 cervical cancer," Mom disclosed. "It's spreading rapidly throughout her body." "Can it be treated?" I asked, grappling with mixed emotions. "Maybe," Mom responded cautiously, with Daisy's consent. They continued. "Survival odds are less than 20%. Treatment's an option, but no guarantees," Mom explained. "Doctors think it started out 4 years ago," Daisy admitted tearfully. "If caught. Earlier, my chances would have been over 90%. "That's terrible. Bruce didn't notice anything," I probed. "No, he never mentioned it," Daisy explained. "I noticed some changes, but I didn't want to worry him." "What kind of changes?" I asked delicately. "Closeness became painful," Daisy confessed. "We stopped altogether for a while." Redirecting the conversation, I said, "New medications might help." "Yes," Mom added. "They could improve her odds by 10 or 15%. "What's your plan?" I asked Daisy. "Fight. I'm not ready to give up," she declared. "And how long will treatment last?" I questioned Mom. "Up to a year, maybe longer," she replied. "Will Daisy stay here?" I pressed. "I think it's best. I'll care for her," Mom assured. Reluctantly, I agreed. I suppose that makes sense. Can you handle this? Mom asked. I glanced at Daisy, recalling our history. Memories flooded back of her callous actions with Bruce. Daisy noticed my change in demeanor. I know you don't trust me, but, she started. Understatement, I sharply interjected. If you injure my mother or cause trouble, I'll kick you out, cancer or not. Understand? Yes, Daisy replied quietly, tears welling. Mom intervened, suggesting dessert. I can help, I offered, but Mom declined. You two could use some time alone, she said, leaving. Daisy wiped her face. I started reading your book, she said. Was I that terrible? I have footage from that night, I revealed. Would you like to see it? Daisy declined, stunned. No wonder you despise me, she said, sobbing. It's all in the book, I continued. I imagined revenge for years. Daisy was horrified. Yolanda suggested exercise, Mom added, bringing apple pie. That's why you look so good now? Daisy asked. Yes, I confirmed. I've been doing martial arts and fitness. But you're still angry, Daisy observed. It's better, Mom reassured. 2 years ago, you wouldn't have even come through the door. I'm truly sorry, Mike. I really am. I knew it would hurt, but I didn't anticipate it would devastate you like this. That's why I gave you everything in the divorce. I thought it would aid in your recovery. When you didn't contest it, I assumed you'd be all right, Daisy explained. To be honest, my lawyer was taken aback when he saw your petition. He urged me to sign it swiftly, fearing you might reconsider, I confessed. Have you dated anyone since then? Daisy asked tentatively. Not really, I replied bluntly. Just a couple of drunken one-night stands, but that's about it. I don't even recall their names. I noticed my mother's eyebrows shoot up, a look of disgust crossing her face, but she held back her thoughts. At that moment, I didn't care about her reaction. Oh God, Daisy sighed. I don't know what to say. A sorry won't be enough, will it? No, I replied bitterly. We ate pie in silence, Daisy's hurt evident, and I avoided. Looking at Mom's face. After saying goodbye, Mom walked me to the door where I spoke quietly. Are you sure you're doing the right thing, Mom? I asked. What about her family? Can't they help? I called her parents and sister, but they refused to help, Mom replied sadly. What a screwed-up family, I muttered. You didn't abandon me, I told Mom. Despite turning bitter, family takes care of family. I agree, Mom said tearfully. What are Daisy's chances really? I asked. Mom looked at Daisy before answering. It's hard to say. Progress has been made in treatment, but it's uncertain. A lot depends on her will to live. Ignoring that, I expressed concern for my mom's well-being. What if she does something behind your back? I worried. I know you don't trust her, but she's at rock bottom right now. People with nothing have nothing to lose, I reasoned. Be careful. If you need anything, let me know, I urged. I will, Mom promised. Thanks for dinner. I'll be in touch. Love you, I said. Love you too, son, Mom replied, kissing my cheek. Please try to keep your emotions in check, Mom requested. Don't push her further, she pleaded. I'll try, I sighed heavily. That's all I ask, Mom said, and I promise not to play matchmaker. Thank you, I smiled before leaving. The next 2 months flew by as I tackled home projects and prepared for the upcoming school year. On Fridays, I visited my mom's house for dinner. I witnessed Daisy's chemotherapy taking a toll, weakening her. Despite the treatment's intent to heal, it seemed ineffective in her case. By mid-August, she lost all her hair, donning a stylish chemo cap. While my feelings for her remained unchanged, I made an effort to be polite, mainly for my mom's peace of mind. Daisy began receiving deductions from Bruce's paycheck, albeit small. She opened a bank account, with Mom overseeing the funds. Daisy insisted on sharing with Mom for expenses. Mom agreed, setting aside 10% for emergencies. On the eve of the new school year, I arrived at Mom's house to find an unfamiliar car parked outside. The sight of Bruce triggered an unsettling feeling. Mom and Daisy seemed apprehensive. Bruce appeared disheveled, a stark contrast to his former self. The restrained part of my mind reacted with restrained aggression. Observing Bruce's decline, he lacked his previous commanding presence, appearing unkempt in dirty jeans and a shirt. Well, look who it is, the arrogant teacher, Bruce sneered arrogantly. My animosity towards him had peaked. Though I'd never been in a physical altercation before, my martial arts training had taught me to avoid fights whenever possible. Even if you emerge victorious, the repercussions can linger for a lifetime. What's your business here, Bruce? I asked icily. I want the money that woman took from me, he growled. Took? I thought the court mandated a portion of your income for alimony, I stated evenly, though my gaze probably conveyed my disdain. It's all the same. They seized my funds and now I'm facing eviction because I can't pay rent, Bruce hissed. Thanks to her, you had the money to travel here from Milwaukee, I pointed out. You could have used it for rent. Don't play games, teacher. Maybe I should have taught you a lesson 10 years ago, he threatened. She stopped me, insisted I treat you with respect for looking after her all those years, Bruce threatened. How about you leave and we pretend none of this happened, I suggested cautiously, raising my hands in an attempt to defuse the situation that could lead to a violent confrontation, leaving me with bruises and a few well-timed counterattacks. But he likely didn't know Daisy's condition. She was ill, battling cancer, and she needed support. Cancer, huh? Is that another one of her lies? Bruce scoffed, placing his soda and sandwich aside before producing a revolver from behind him. Funny, I happen to have the cure for that, he taunted, aiming the weapon at Daisy. Bruce, please, my mom pleaded, gesturing towards her phone on the table. The emergency operator likely heard our entire exchange. Please, I've already called the police, they're on their way. I began to position myself between Bruce and Daisy, but he swiftly directed the weapon toward me. Desperation was evident in his eyes. Mentally, I retreated. I hadn't come this far, survived this much, to be senselessly shot by a cop. Stay put, teacher, not one move, Bruce warned, his hands trembling. In that instant, we spotted flashing red and blue lights outside the front window and heard a voice over the intercom. Mr. Williams, this is the police. The house is surrounded. We're aware you're armed. Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up, the officer instructed. You should listen, I warned Bruce, who stared wide-eyed. How did they know about my weapon? Bruce inquired. I informed them. I saw it tucked in your waistband, Mom disclosed. And Mike's right, follow their orders. This is your final chance, Mr. Williams. Surrender the weapon and exit the premises, the officer commanded through the speaker. Glancing at us, Bruce seemed to grow increasingly uneasy. Our eyes met briefly, and I noticed his resolve waver. If you were wise, you'd comply, I advised. There won't be another warning. As the back door opened, 2 officers suddenly appeared in the room, pistols drawn, aimed at Bruce. Drop your weapons, one ordered. Bruce turned, eyes widening as he realized he was facing 2 loaded weapons. Recklessly, he raised his firearm, but the officers fired first. Despite the ringing in my ears, Daisy's scream pierced through, shocking me. 2 more officers entered the room as my mom reacted, clutching an heirloom. Frozen, I watched as officers attended to Daisy and my wounded mom, while 2 others knelt beside Bruce. 1. Officer confirmed Bruce's death, leaving me shaken. Despite feeling a mix of relief and resentment, I steadied my mom. Paramedics arrived, determining Bruce's fate and attending to Daisy. I offered to accompany my mom to the hospital. At the crime scene, detectives took our statement and advised us to leave. They assured us of securing the house and provided a cleaning service recommendation. Driving to the hospital, my mind spun with conflicting emotions. At the hospital, we navigated bureaucracy, eventually settling in the waiting area for Daisy's surgery. Finally, the doors parted and a doctor approached us. Mrs. Carpenter, he inquired. Yes, that's me, Mom confirmed. How's Daisy? Miss Williams is stable and improving. I anticipate she'll pull through the gunshot wound. Fortunately, the bullet passed through without hitting any critical organs. She's fortunate, the doctor informed us. Just a tad to the left, and it could have been fatal. Thank the Lord, Mom breathed a sigh of relief. She's lost considerable blood, and her compromised state due to cancer and chemotherapy isn't in her favor. However, we've detected something else and informed her oncologist, the doctor disclosed. Oh? What's that? Mom inquired. I'm aware she's undergoing chemotherapy, but we've detected what seems to be signs of infection in her system. I've ordered a battery of tests as a precaution, he explained. Oh dear, Mom sighed. Will she be all right? It's too early to say. She's currently sedated. We'll need to keep her here for a minimum of 3 days. May we visit her? Mom requested. I'm afraid not. Perhaps tomorrow morning at the earliest. Let me provide you with a card. You can reach this number anytime for updates and to learn her room assignment, he said, handing Mom the card. We drove back to Mom's house in silence, with her crying most of the way. My thoughts were consumed by the surreal situation. Daisy, whom I once harbored dark fantasies about, was now fighting for her life in the hospital. Despite feeling a pang of remorse, I pushed the thoughts aside. Arriving home, I noticed the crime scene tape discarded in the trash, and a note from the detective declaring the scene cleared. Mom wasted no time in cleaning up, while I disposed of the chair Daisy had been shot in. Upon my return, I found Mom on her knees, tears mixing with the blood as she scrubbed the floor. Offering help, she declined, determined to manage alone. I suggested she stay at my place, but she insisted on staying. Respecting her decision, I resolved to stay with her despite her protestations. I offered to cook dinner before we turned in. Sharing a knowing look, we agreed a glass of wine would be a fitting end to a tumultuous day. As she resumed cleaning, her movements became more frantic. Concerned about potential nightmares, we found solace in a glass of wine or sheer exhaustion, sleeping deeply until morning. We moved through the house quietly until the phone interrupted our somber atmosphere around 10. I retreated to the kitchen to give her privacy, and when she joined me minutes later, she relayed Daisy's condition, serious but stable, undergoing tests with an expected return to her room by mid-afternoon. Lost in thought, I barely registered any emotions. She interrupted my introspection, requesting a ride to the hospital at 2:30. I agreed, departing early to handle errands before meeting her at her house and proceeding to the hospital. After purchasing gifts for Daisy, including her favorite flowers and a book, Mom teased me playfully at the register, prompting me to defensively brush off any deeper sentiment. But her words lingered, reminding me that feelings, even complex ones, were valid. Afterward, we headed to Daisy's room. Though awake, she appeared drained. Mom planted a kiss on her cheek and passed her the purchased card. Her eyes sparkled when she noticed the flowers. "My favorites! You remembered!" she exclaimed, surprised. Her voice, though weak, held a pleasant tone. "Yes," I responded, extending the novel. "If I recall correctly, you were reading it when you left with Bruce," I added, my voice devoid of emotion, though a slight pang hit my gut. "Yes, I did read it, but never got to finish." "Thank you," she murmured softly, not meeting my gaze as she thumbed through the paperback. "Any updates?" Mom inquired. "Not yet," Daisy answered, shaking her head. She closed the book but held on to it tightly as if it were a cherished possession, nestling into it like a teddy bear. She added, "They said I probably won't hear anything for at least a day." "That's okay," Mom agreed. Then the nurse chimed in. "How are you feeling?" "Terrible," Daisy groaned. "I'm exhausted, my side and stomach ache." "They'll figure it out," Mom comforted. "And Bruce?" Daisy inquired, still avoiding my gaze. "He was pronounced dead at the scene," Mom informed her. "Good," Daisy stated firmly, finally showing some strength. "I'm glad he's dead." Mom's expression darkened, but she remained silent, gently patting Daisy's hand and nodding in understanding. I stayed quiet while the women conversed. Hearing my ex-wife denounce Bruce eased some of the pent-up animosity, yet it couldn't erase a decade of bitterness. A nurse entered, checking Daisy's vital signs and administering medication. "Time for your meds, Daisy," the nurse said, handing her a cup of pills. Daisy swallowed them with water, expressing exhaustion. "Call me Daisy," she requested, showing resilience despite her weariness. "I'll inform the staff," the nurse said, suggesting rest for Daisy. Mom inquired about test results, and the nurse assured they'd have news by tomorrow morning. After exchanging farewells, I noticed Daisy's longing glance as we left. I offered a faint smile before closing the door. After dropping off my mom, I returned home to tackle my weekend tasks. The following morning, we convened in Daisy's hospital room. Mom, a part-time volunteer, had arrived a couple of hours earlier. Soon after my arrival, 2 doctors entered. I was introduced to Dr. Samuels, Daisy's surgeon, and Dr. Kincaid, her oncologist. Though they tried to appear assured, their concern was palpable. "What's the update?" I inquired, eager for positive news despite their demeanor. Dr. Kincaid responded first. "Miss Williams is grappling with both peritonitis and diverticulitis, which can account for some of the symptoms you've mentioned previously." Dr. Samuels elaborated. "Mrs. Carpenter," he addressed my mom, taking over the report, "our scans have detected several large pockets of infection in Daisy's abdomen. Furthermore, we suspect her gallbladder is perforated and will need to be removed." "How did this occur?" I inquired, feeling my mom's hand tighten around mine. "There are likely multiple factors, but it appears she had an underlying condition exacerbated by cancer and chemotherapy medications," Dr. Kincaid responded. "What's the next step?" my mom asked softly. "She will eventually require surgery to eradicate the infection and repair the damage, but we'd like to allow her body more time to recover from the recent surgery she underwent. So, we'll keep her here on antibiotics for the next couple of weeks to monitor if the infection subsides naturally. Chemotherapy will be paused during this period," Dr. Samuels explained. "What are her odds?" I asked, striving to maintain composure. The doctors exchanged glances before replying. I didn't like the gravity in their expressions. "I won't sugarcoat it," Dr. Samuels began. "Without surgery, her prospects are grim. Her body is currently delicately balanced. Administering high doses of antibiotics could potentially disrupt her metabolism and further weaken her, potentially even leading to a fatal outcome. Although the current antibiotic regimen seems to have halted the infection spread and is gradually reducing it, it won't mend the damage. While there's no visible perforation in the bowel wall, she was likely on the brink of it when we intervened. Exploratory surgery aimed at identifying unseen issues carries significant risks at this point. Manipulating the intestines could inadvertently worsen the situation. Our goal is to cleanse the intestines of infection and mend any damage. She must be robust enough to endure surgery and chemotherapy afterward. Malnutrition has severely debilitated her, and she won't withstand chemotherapy until the infections are eradicated and her other bodily functions normalize. Peritonitis alone poses a grave threat, and coupled with cancer, he trailed off with a shrug. The surgery itself poses significant risks, Dr. Kincaid interjected. Very significant, considering the extent of infection in her abdomen and the damage to her internal organs. Her chances of survival are estimated to be between 30 and 40%. So without surgery, my chances are slim to none, queried Daisy solemnly. Though her eyes were wide and she appeared to be sweating, her voice remained steady. Unfortunately, that appears to be the case, confirmed Dr. Kincaid. However, once you recover from the surgery, you should be able to proceed with chemotherapy without complications. In that case, it seems we have no alternative but to proceed with the surgery, Daisy conceded weakly, sinking back onto the bed. Very well. We'll organize everything accordingly, declared Dr. Samuels. With their departure, Daisy broke into tears. Her mother embraced her, offering solace. Don't fret, Daisy. You have the finest medical team in the hospital on your side. Everything will work out, she reassured Daisy amid her sobs. I had much to contend with, and this wasn't the place for it. It was odd. Not long ago, I might have welcomed news of Daisy's demise, but now my emotions were in turmoil. I have to head out. School starts tomorrow, but I'll check in on you from time to time, I offered. Yeah, I'd appreciate that, Mike, Daisy exclaimed. Mom smiled at me. We left the room and I walked her to her car, waving as she drove away. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept my promise, visiting Daisy several times. We discussed various topics, from my teaching and students to her failed marriage with Bruce and our own failed marriage. We also delved into our emotions and the events that led us here. During one visit, I brought up her family. I'm curious, I began. What? Daisy asked. What's the deal with your family? Why do they dislike you so much? Mom reached out to them, but they want nothing to do with you. Remember when I mentioned they disowned me after the lawsuit? Daisy recalled. Yes, I remember, I replied. What I didn't tell you is they knew about Bruce from the start. They agreed to keep you in the dark, and in return, Bruce promised to support them in retirement. He even offered to buy them cruise tickets. And you and your sister knew about this? I asked, feeling anger rising. Daisy looked down in shame. Yes, she whispered before meeting my gaze again. It was another betrayal. I know, and I'm deeply sorry. So your family used you and Bruce, just like you used me, I observed, my tone icy. She looked miserable. I tempered my emotions. If you don't want the answer, don't ask the question. Mostly, Daisy admitted sorrowfully. Things went downhill after the lawsuit, and my family wanted nothing to do with me. That explains their treatment of me after you left, I remarked. It also sheds light on why you thought it was acceptable to use me while waiting for Bruce. Everyone seemed to have the upper hand except me. Reinforcing my belief that reconciliation with Daisy was unlikely, given all that had transpired, Daisy seemed to share this sentiment, showing no initiative to revive what we once had. However, as we reconciled, I glimpsed the woman I fell in love with, sparking hope. Surprisingly, my animosity towards her and Bruce lessened after his demise, although I still wished for his just punishment beyond this life. Mr. Smith granted me the day off for Daisy's surgery, arranging for a substitute teacher. At the hospital, I expressed my worries before she was wheeled into the operating room. I've said hurtful things and I'm sorry, I began. I hope you can overcome this. Daisy's weak smile surprised me. Thank you, Mike. I accept your apology. I'm sorry for what I've done to you, she confessed. I love you, and you've endured more than you should have. Promise me something, she implored. What? I inquired. Find someone you love no matter what, she sincerely urged. I agreed, feeling a sense of absolution. We need to proceed to the operating room, sir, the orderly interrupted. For one moment, I requested. Spontaneously, I kissed Daisy's cheek. You've got this, I reassured her. For a brief moment, she resembled the woman I married, prompting me to wonder if she ever truly loved me beyond my role as a provider. I rose, feeling a bit lightheaded as the orderly guided her gurney out of the room. That was kind of you, Mike, Mom murmured softly as we followed into the operating room. After she was wheeled inside, we settled in the waiting area. Hours passed while the surgery progressed. Attempting to focus on the TV proved futile. My thoughts remained fixated on the tumultuous events of the past decade. Mom crocheted quietly while I paced, drowning myself in one cup of machine-made coffee after another, trapped in a relentless cycle of memories. 6 hours later, Dr. Samuels emerged from the operating room with a troubling expression. He motioned for us to join him in a nearby room, where he sat across from us, visibly weary. I braced for bad news, fearing he might break down in tears. Mom's grip on my hand was so tight it made my fingers ache, and I anticipated his words before he uttered them. "I'm deeply sorry, Mrs. Carpenter, Mr. Carpenter. We did everything within our power for Daisy. However, the level of infection and damage to her internal organs was too severe," he conveyed with sorrow. Her body ceased functioning. She had signed a DNR and a form consenting to donate her body to cancer research. Despite our ethical efforts, once her heart stopped, we were unable to revive her. "Please accept my condolences for your loss." Instantly, tears streamed down Mom's face, and though I felt a tear welling up in my eye, I refused to let it fall. I embraced my mother as she wept, nodding in acknowledgement to the doctor. "Thank you for all your efforts," I expressed to him. We exchanged a handshake, and I noticed a tear escaping from his eye. Once Mom had composed herself, we walked back to Daisy's room in a daze. We packed her belongings in silence, knowing words were unnecessary. In the bedside table drawer, I discovered a small envelope labeled Mike in Daisy's handwriting. I opened it and unfolded the letter inside. "Mike," the letter commenced, "you will only read this if I do not survive. Thank you for being there for me, especially in these last weeks. You owe me nothing, but you and your mother stood by me when others deserted me. I realize what I did to you a decade ago was inexcusable, and I deeply regret causing you pain. Despite everything, a part of me still loves you, and I'm sorry for the turmoil my involvement with Bruce has caused me. I understand that you will never feel the same toward me, and I respect that. My hope is that my passing will bring you peace at last. With love, Daisy." The note left me trembling, tears streaming down my face as I showed it to my mom. It unleashed a torrent of emotions. We shared, crying and holding each other, the first time I'd wept since my father's passing 6 years ago. Packing Daisy's belongings, I realized a profound change within me. A decade of anger and bitterness evaporated, replaced by an unexpected calmness. Her passing seemed to break down walls of resentment, offering me a way out of the dark maze I'd been trapped in. Strangely, her passing brought healing. After leaving the hospital in a daze, we settled Daisy's things at my mom's house, sharing a sober dinner. Later, she handed me a photo of Daisy smiling in her mother's chair during chemotherapy, a memento to cherish. Asking about contacting Daisy's family, my mom offered to call, but I declined, recalling a previous difficult conversation. Instead, I promised to make the call once home, taking the number she provided. Calling Daisy's father, Fred, I was met with hostility, leaving me puzzled by his animosity, considering their refusal of support and retirement crews. "I regret to inform you that your daughter Daisy passed away during surgery today," I conveyed. "I don't have a daughter named Daisy," Fred grumbled. "Not anymore," I clarified. "Why are you calling?" Fred inquired. "I just thought you might want to know," I responded. "What do you want from me?" Fred questioned. "Are you expecting us to request her body or something?" I countered, "No, she donated her body to cancer research," I disclosed, barely containing my frustration. "Well, at least her life served a purpose," he growled. "Don't call here again." I heard him curse before terminating the call. Although I felt the urge to call back and vent my anger, I realized it would be futile. With a sigh, I dialed my principal's number and informed him of the news. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mike," he sympathized. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I replied, "but I'll be okay." "Say, why don't you take the remainder of the week off, and I'll mark it as paid parental leave. I'll arrange for a substitute." "Thank you. I really appreciate it," I expressed. After concluding our conversation, I retrieved a beer from the fridge. As I opened the bottle, I gazed at the photo my mom had given me. "Here's to you, kid," I murmured, taking a deep sip. In June, I drove to the cemetery, always feeling uneasy among reminders of mortality. Parking under a large maple tree, I made my way to the monument. Despite its newness, it bore the name Williams, a decision I reluctantly accepted due to bureaucratic insistence. I placed a white carnation in the bronze flower tube beside the monument, reflecting on the decision to bury Daisy's ashes rather than scatter them. Bruce, on the other hand, lay in a neglected corner, marked only by a simple concrete block with a serial number. Afterward, I poured a bottle of urine on his grave, a solitary act of closure. If anyone caught me urinating on his grave, I'd have some explaining to do. After a few minutes of reflection, I bid him farewell. All my tears were shed last week at her burial. Despite reaching out to Daisy's family and friends, I figured if Joe DiMaggio could honor Marilyn for 2 decades, I could lay Daisy to rest and leave her carnations. Sometimes, amidst the grayness, I felt neither sad nor happy, but like an empty blackboard waiting to be filled. Heading back to my car, I noticed 2 other mourners nearby. A woman in a neat black dress, her long blonde hair braided, and a young boy in a camouflage jacket. Approaching them, I glanced at the sign, Ryan G. Angers, Sergeant, USMC. The woman looked at me with fear in her blue eyes. "I'm sorry," I murmured, not wanting to intrude. Before she could respond, the boy said, "I miss him so much," his eyes reflecting the same shade of blue as his mother's, his words laden with longing, perhaps seeking solace or reaching out for help. He must have been a handsome man if he resembled his father. I knelt down, pulling out a notepad and pen from my pocket, tools I used more than my phone's note function. "Here, son," I said, offering them to him. "Write him a note and tuck it in that crack next to the marker. He'll get it." He hugged me, took the notebook and pen, and began writing. As he did, his mother gazed at me with genuine gratitude. Suddenly, I heard 2 soft chuckles, one in each ear, a female and a male. Then the female voice whispered, "Keep your promise." In that moment, I sensed June would no longer be a struggle for me.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I remember meeting Alistair at a party hosted by his fraternity. He stepped in when some creepy guy was hitting on me and wouldn't take no for an answer. Not long after, we started dating. It was a strange coincidence that we both came from Bay County, even though we lived in different parts, just 20 minutes apart. A few months into our relationship, I wasn't seeing anyone else. I still remember the first time we made love, 3 months after we met. He took me to a lovely restaurant, and afterward, we went dancing. We ended up making out in his car, and I was half undressed when I whispered for him to take me somewhere private. We drove to a Motel 6, and that night, we made love for the first time. From then on, we were exclusive and planned to get married after he earned his master's degree. A year after he graduated, we tied the knot. A couple of years later, Amanda was born, and 2 years after her, Andrew joined our family. We both adore our children and can't imagine life without them. Today, I'm enjoying the company's St. Patrick's Day party. We have a great spot to watch the parade. Normally, Alistair would have his car in the parade, but this year, it's not working, so he's riding with a friend. He'll call me when he's finished with the parade, and I'll pick him up a few blocks away before we come back to the party. My parents are watching the kids so we can enjoy the day. It's a casual gathering, and I'm wearing a slacks and top combo that's not too revealing but still flattering. My boss, Henry Miles, has been flirting with me all afternoon, and I've been playfully flirting back. His wife couldn't make it because she's not feeling well. You know the saying, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Henry is tall, around 6 feet, and weighs about 200 pounds. He's in great shape, with a body that would make anyone swoon. He's been putting the moves on me since I arrived, and for some reason, I've been responding. As the classic cars rolled by, I looked for Alistair but didn't spot him. I wondered where he was. After a while, I went back inside to grab another drink. "Let's head upstairs to the balcony." "No one's up there right now," Henry suggested. I followed him, and once we got there, he kissed me. I found myself kissing him back, and soon it became passionate. His touch set me on fire. I broke the kiss and pulled his hand away. "No, someone might see us," I said, playfully shaking my finger at him. He removed his hand but pulled me closer, wrapping both arms around me for another kiss. I put my arms around his neck, and we kissed even more passionately. Suddenly, my phone rings, and I pull it out of my pocket. It's only Alistair calling, so I send it to voicemail and turn off the phone. Without hesitation, I go back to kissing Henry until we hear footsteps coming up the stairs. We quickly break the kiss and return to the party as if nothing happened. The evening continues, and I'm having fun flirting with Henry and a few of the partners. As darkness falls, any thoughts of picking up Alistair vanish from my mind. Before I know it, I find myself upstairs in a bedroom, naked, lying in bed with Henry. Oh my God, he's big, much bigger than Alistair. Exhausted from the intensity of what just happened, we both fall asleep. The next thing I realize, it's 10 p.m., and we're the only ones left in the house. In a rush, we take a quick shower and get dressed. After a brief, lingering kiss, we leave the house and head to our cars. As I drive away, guilt begins to weigh on me. This is the first time I've ever cheated on Alistair. Panicked, I race to my parents' house to pick up the kids. They have school tomorrow, and I should have been there hours ago. I know my mom is going to give me the 3rd degree when I arrive. I pulled into my parents' driveway around 10:30 p.m. and noticed the kitchen lights were off. I knocked on the door, and after a moment, my dad finally turned on the porch light to see who was outside. He opened the door, both he and my mom standing there with confused looks on their faces. "Why are you here?" my dad asked. "I came to get the kids and take them home," I replied. At that, my mom pushed past my dad and started giving me the third degree, grilling me about why I was so late. After what felt like forever, I managed to escape and headed back to my car, frustrated and fuming. I couldn't believe Alistair didn't call to let me know he had already picked up the kids. Instead, I had to stand there for 10 minutes while my mom lectured me, tearing me apart. I was steaming about it the entire drive home, and in my frustration, I didn't even think to check my phone. I pulled into our driveway around 11 p.m., parked in the garage, and walked into the house. There was Alistair, casually sitting in the living room, watching the news. Without giving him a chance to explain, I exploded. "You dirty, rotten son of a bitch. Why didn't you call me and tell me you had already picked up the kids from my mom's house, you a-hole?" I snapped, seething with anger. I had to listen to her for 10 minutes reaming me out. She was asking me why I was there, saying, "Didn't Alistair tell you he's picking up the kids? Are you two having marriage problems? Are you running around on him? Why wasn't he with you at the party?" God, she drives me nuts sometimes. I stood there, fuming, waiting for him to respond. "And you could have at least called me. Tell me, shithead, why weren't you at the party? What, are we too good for you? You're just an a-hole for doing this to me." I continued to rant, my anger boiling over. "If you'd looked at your phone or had it turned on, you would have seen I left a message that I was at the house and was going to pick up the kids from your parents' place," Alistair replied calmly. "Bullshit. I didn't see any messages on my phone," I shot back. "Did you even look? I called you 4 times to let you know I was waiting at the parking lot for you to come get me. I even texted you a few times too," he said, growing frustrated. "I never saw any messages or texts on my phone. You probably had the wrong number, a-hole. Why didn't you just walk or get a ride back to the party? 2's company, but 3's a crowd," he muttered under his breath. "What did you say, you a-hole? Are you insinuating I did something wrong? Screw you. You can kiss my butt, you maggot. You really think I did something wrong?" Alistair looked at me coolly. "If the shoe fits, wear it." I could practically feel steam pouring out of my ears. I was beyond furious. "Screw you, a-hole. Don't even think about coming upstairs to my bedroom. You can sleep down here." I stomped up the stairs, my mind a whirlwind of rage. I was too pissed to even check on the kids. My thoughts were scattered, and I wasn't thinking straight. Once I got to my bedroom, I slammed the door and locked it to make sure Alistair couldn't come in. As I stood there, panting with anger, I wondered why I went off on him like that. He hadn't actually done anything wrong. Deep down, I knew it was my guilty conscience from cheating on him that fueled the outburst. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning in the dark. In the morning, I finally checked my phone. It was turned off. When I turned it back on, I had a bunch of phone messages and a few text messages from Alistair. Damn, he was right. He did call, and I sure screwed this all up. For the next 6 weeks, we avoided each other, almost like 2 cats on a hot tin roof. I was starting to get over the guilty feel, even though I am still having sex with Henry at the office. Sometimes our boss Logan Carter would join us for a threesome. It did not seem to bother me anymore that I was cheating on Alistair. I knew that my law firm would protect me. Things started to calm down in May. Alistair is back sleeping in my bed, but I still won't have any sex with him. I really don't know why I am punishing him by withholding sex. I guess I am still somewhat pissed at him. There again, I don't know why I am still mad at him. Memorial weekend, my mom and dad were taking the kids up to their cabin on Higgins Lake for the long weekend. Mom told me it was time for me to reconnect with my husband. Alistair took me out for a real nice dinner Friday night. We went dancing afterwards. It felt like we were a married couple again. When we got home, I let him have sex with me. I even participated a little bit. Saturday morning, Alistair made a nice breakfast, and when we finished cleaning up the kitchen, he told me he wanted to talk with me. We went into the living room, and he explained about his company conference in Florida. I started to get excited, until he told the dates. It took place over the same weekend that my company has a dinner and dance. There is no way that I am going to miss my company's function. We ended up having a major blow-up over the dates and functions. Sometimes Alistair can be a major a-hole. He went out to cut the grass, and I left to spend money on me for the dinner dance. I got home around 5 p.m., and Alistair is sleeping on the couch. I sneaked up the stairs with my packages and hid them in my closet. The rest of the weekend, we did not speak to each other. We had another fight as he and the kids were leaving for his conference. God, he can piss me off at times. What an a-hole he can be. Well, I have the house to myself for the rest of week and weekend. This should be a very restful week. The next 3 days just flew by. I realized that I never missed the kids or Alistair. I never gave them a call, and they never called me. So we are even. Saturday finally arrived, and I spent the whole day in the beauty salon getting ready for the party. I had the works done, hair, makeup, fingernails, and toenails painted. I went home and got dressed. The party started at 6 p.m., and I arrived 20 minutes late to make an entrance. I knew that I looked fabulous. I am sitting at a table with my boss Henry and his wife, and our senior partner Logan Carter and his wife. They had a single junior lawyer as my date. A junior partner and his wife rounded out our table. I did not know that they had some bedrooms upstairs at the country club. I had a great time drinking wine and dancing. Oh yes, and I had sex with Logan twice and the 3 partners once each. I even screwed my date twice. I got home around 3 a.m. sore all over. My feet hurt from dancing so much. Thank God that Alistair is not home. I don't think I could have sex with another man. I shed my clothes and crawled into bed. I got up at noon and took a nice long bath. I cleaned the house and got the clothes all washed. I knew that the kids should be home around 5 p.m. Right on cue, they drove into the driveway. I completely ignored Alistair and hugged my 2 kids and asked them all about their vacation. I knew that pissed Alistair off, but so what, screw him. A couple of weeks after the 4th of July, Henry started talking about the lawyers' conference at the Grand Traverse Resort in Traverse City. He told me, "Kathy, you are going to this conference, but not your husband. We don't bring our spouses to this conference. The 3 partners will be there, and they expect a repeat of the dinner and dance we had last month. I am excited about going to the conference." When I told Alistair about it, he just shrugged. Prick. He couldn't bring down my good mood, though. I even gave him a couple of mercy sex to keep him happy. It's finally Sunday, the day we are supposed to leave. I am packed and ready to go. We are all meeting at the office, where we will divide up into cars and head north. It was an unbelievable conference. I hardly ever left the room. There seemed to be always one of the guys there to screw me silly. For 6 days I screwed each of the 4 guys, and maybe some other guys. By the time I got home Saturday, I was whipped and screwed out. I spent Friday night with Henry, and I could not believe what he said to me. "I want to really hurt your husband," he said. "What do you want to do to him?" "I want you to have my baby." "What?" "I want you to stop taking your birth control pills, and next month stop screwing him. I am to be your only partner till you get pregnant. This way we can make him a true cuck and have him raise our child." "Oh, that sounds exciting. I will stop taking my pills right now. My period starts next week, and by the middle of September, I should be ready to conceive your child." Henry got me pregnant in September, and our plan was to have Alistair screw me silly as soon as we knew that I am pregnant. Unfortunately, Alistair did not buy into our plan, and no matter how much I tried in the next couple of months, I could never get Alistair to screw me in my fertile time of the month. "Henry, Alistair has not made love to me in 2 months. It will be hard to pin my pregnancy on him," I said. "Don't worry, baby, we will string him up to dry and force him to accept this child. I have a couple of ideas on just what to do to keep him in line," he said. In November, Henry informed me about a company cruise right after Christmas for both spouses and children. The cruise would start the 27th of December and return on January 2nd. "Kathy, you should bring your kids and husband for this cruise," he told me. "Screw Alistair. He can stay home, but I would love to take this cruise with my 2 kids, I replied. We had an odd Thanksgiving, where he went to his mother's house by himself, and I took the kids with me to my folks' house. Of course, my mother could not shut up about why Alistair was not with us for Thanksgiving dinner. We fought the whole month of December on whether the kids will go with me or not on the cruise. Finally, just before Christmas, I gave in and decided to go by myself. I am so pissed at Alistair for doing this to me. He is denying me a chance to have a vacation with the kids, just like he did last summer in Florida. December just flew by, and it was Christmas Day. Alistair and I put on an Academy Award-winning show for both the kids and our folks. We acted like the most lovey-dovey couple, fooling both folks that things were never better for us. I could not wait for the cruise to start. Finally, it is time to leave for my company cruise. I had a great time on the cruise. There was never a shortage of men for me to be entertained by. That includes the top 4 from my company. It was a refreshing cruise for me to recharge my batteries. I got home Saturday night, and the house is empty. There is a note on the table from Alistair that he and the kids would be home Monday evening. Little did I know that the dam was about to break. Monday morning at about 10 minutes before 10 a.m., I was called by Henry to come to the main conference room. When I got there, the 3 partners and Henry Miles were waiting for me. Ethan Whitman will be here at 10 a.m. to meet with all of us. You don't have any idea why he wants to meet with us, do you? He asked. I don't know who Ethan Whitman is, I replied. He was a former partner of this firm, Henry told me. I was kind of shocked. I did not know that there was a fourth partner. I just shook my head and kept my mouth shut. There is a knock on the door, and Logan's secretary let Ethan in the conference room. Well, Ethan, we are all here. What is it that is so important that you need to talk with all of us? Logan Carter said. Well, I am here representing Austin James Kelly in his divorce from Allison Joyce Kelly, Ethan said. I gave a loud gasp as the rest tried to all talk at once. My ears were buzzing. My eyes started to mist over. Everyone was talking, but it seemed like I was not hearing just what is being said. I started to feel faint. Ethan, what is going on here? Why are we all here for a divorce case? This should be handled between you and whoever Kathy gets for an attorney, Logan said. Well, you might be right, Logan, but you see there is a whole lot more here at stake than just a simple divorce. I have in my custody some information that needs to be reviewed by all 5 of you. I think that a few days should be enough for you all to review this information. Let's say that we all meet back here Friday morning at 10 a.m. Ethan said as he passed out the envelopes with Alistair's demands, the PI report, pictures, and the 2 discs. Also included were the divorce papers. Ethan got up and said to Logan, if you have any question or need me for something, you know my phone number. If I don't hear anything, I will meet you all Friday morning 10 a.m. After Ethan left the conference room, Henry walked over to me and sat down. Kathy, you don't look so good. Are you going to be all right? Henry asked me. I just nodded my head okay. He got up and walked back to his chair and sat down and started to review the information. Well, let's see just what Ethan has that he is so proud of, Logan said. While they reviewed the PI report and looked the pictures over, I started to read Alistair's demands. He wants my children. There is no way he is getting my children in a million years. He can't take my children, can he? I cried. Henry came over again and sat down next to me. Now, Kathy, calm down. Let us get through all this information, then we can start making a plan of attack, he said to me. I just nodded and sobbed onto his shoulder while he stroked my hair. He nodded at the other 3 to continue reading while he calmed me down. It looks like most of the information he has won't be admissible evidence in a court of law. He can file for divorce on a couple of motions, but in Michigan it is a no-fault state, and everything will be split 50-50ths. He would have to prove that Kathy is an unfit mother to gain custody of the children, and she would also get the house. I wonder just what he is fishing for with this entire stack of paper. Let us watch these 2 discs and see just what is on them, Logan said. You guys watch it and fill me in. Let me get Kathy out of here and back into her office. It will give her a chance to catch her breath and calm down, Henry said. The other 3 nodded their heads in agreement, and Henry led me out of the conference room. A couple days later on a Thursday afternoon, we all met in the conference room to discuss the results of the study done on the information that Ethan had given all of us. I had watched the video and listened to the audio, and knew things did not sound really good for us. This is a mess, even though he can't use this information in a divorce case. If this got out, we will all be divorced, and clients will leave us, and we will be ruined. This is the purest form of a blackmail case if I ever had seen one, Logan said. For the next 3 hours, we discussed every angle of the information that Ethan had left with us. The final results were that Logan, as president of the firm, would meet with Ethan tomorrow alone to try and feel him out on just what he planned to do with the information. It is Friday morning, and Logan's secretary ushered Ethan into Logan's office. Logan, is it just you and me for this meeting? Ethan said. Let's stop the posturing, Ethan. All this evidence that you have is inadmissible in court, and you know it. Maybe so, Logan, maybe so, but I don't control this information. Alistair does. He told me that he has it all set up so the information that I gave you will be made public, including to all of your wives. That includes your client list and media outlets. Is this what you want, Logan? If that happens, then Ethan, I will sue you and Mr. Kelly. I will break both of you in half. Logan, I don't control what happens with that information. Only Mr. Kelly does. And he doesn't care. It seems that your firm broke up his marriage by making his wife the company hooker. He will release that information, and you can do whatever you want to do. But the damage will be done. Okay, Ethan, where do we go from here? Do you talk for the other 4? Yes, we all agreed that I would be lead counsel on this matter. You read his list of demands. Also, he wants this divorce rushed through the courts. That is something that we both can make happen. Once the divorce is final, the rest of this will blow over. What assurance do I have that the information will never be released? I don't have an answer for that question. I know that he is using the information as protection against retribution that you might take. So that is how I lost my children to that prick Alistair. I will never forgive him for doing this to me. I will never get a chance to watch my children grow up. I think that if I was not pregnant with Henry's baby, I would probably in all likelihood kill myself. I just hope that sometime in the future, Alistair will have a change of heart and at least let me visit my 2 children. It has been 5 years since Alistair left and took my 2 kids with him. I have forgiven him for doing this to me, but I sure would love to see my 2 children again. It is May, and Alice's birthday is next month. I stopped at my folks' house to talk with Mom. I wanted to plan a nice party for Alice. Mom, next month is Alice's birthday, and I would like to plan a nice party here, so the kids can use your pool. What do you think? I asked. She has this big shit-eating grin on her face. This is so unlike my mother not to voice her opinion. It is almost like she is dangling me on a fish hook. I have a better idea. How about we take you and Alice on a trip with us to see your children in Switzerland? She said. I'm stunned. I think my mouth moved, but no words seemed to come out of my mouth. Oh, Kathy, close your mouth before you catch some flies in it. Alistair invited you and Alice to join us in our next trip to see our grandchildren. I think this would be a great birthday gift to Alice to see her stepbrother and sister. What do you think? Do you want us to get tickets for the 2 of you to join us on our trip in June? Of course, I said yes, and in June we left for Switzerland. It was a great trip. Alistair and Maria were very nice to me. I could see that they are very much in love with each other. I could see just what I gave up, and it just crushed me. I made some horrible mistakes, and it cost me dearly. Someday I hope to have what they have in each other. It was great to see my 2 kids, and we had a very good time together. Man, how the time just flew. Before I knew it, it was time to leave. Alistair and Maria were great host and hostess, and they invited us back for Christmas in Switzerland. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Jessica, that's all you get. You owe me $700 for the dumplings at Mila's birthday celebration, a gathering I had never been invited to before. That's what Daisy told me. In front of me, there was just a single dumpling, pointing at it as if feeding a pet. Daisy said with a laugh, "Here you go, Arya." The elementary schooler seemed to be in on the joke too, laughing at me. Mother and daughter both mocking me with the same demonic grin completely extinguished any affection I had for my granddaughter. I've had enough. I'll just pay the bill and head home, I said, standing up. Daisy, still smiling, waved me off dismissively. Disappointed in Arthur, who wouldn't even meet my eyes. If they wanted to celebrate with just their immediate family of 3, that's fine by me. I was willing to pay, but with that attitude, any desire to celebrate had long since vanished. No matter what they say, I'm never getting involved again, I thought irritably as I went to settle the bill. Then someone tapped my shoulder. Hearing her words, I decided to get back at Daisy and her family. I'm Jessica. This year I turned 65, blessed with children. I've led a normal life, though my husband was always focused on his work and not much of a talker. I believed we had a good relationship. I thought my life was without major upheaval, but there was one thing that troubled me. It was Daisy, my eldest son's wife. I understand that it's common for wives and mothers-in-law to not get along. However, Daisy's attitude of treating me as an enemy just for being the mother-in-law was causing me trouble. Jessica, you're always free at home, right? Let me do you a favor and take care of your cute grandchild. Daisy, I have plans today. I told you I can't do last-minute favors. Remember? I never heard that. Maybe you just think you told me. I never knew what set her off, but Daisy always had a harsh attitude towards me. She'd call suddenly or come over unannounced, dumping tasks on me without caring about my plans. Even if I helped, she'd never thank me, saying a parent should naturally do that much. But if I refused, she'd condemn me as some terrible villain. Lately, I've been finding excuses not to comply with her demands. Yet Daisy would confront me, labeling me as a heartless person, accusing me of treating her poorly or not loving my grandchild. Daisy seemed to truly despise me. The final straw was when Arya, my granddaughter, started elementary school and I was taking care of her after school. Grandma, you're mean to Mom, aren't you? What? No? Why would you say that? That's what Mom says. You always lie and say you don't. Liar. Mom was crying. Apologies. Apparently, Daisy had been telling Arya that I was mean to her, and I was confronted with such accusations from Arya. I had no idea what she was talking about and tried to get the details from Arya, but Arya, seemingly taking Daisy's words at face value, just kept calling me a liar, making it impossible to have a conversation. I couldn't understand why Daisy would manipulate such a young child to dislike me. With no idea what to do or what was even happening, I was at my wit's end. When I talked to my husband, his response was just, "She's a child. She probably doesn't understand yet." He didn't seem too concerned. Consulting my eldest son, Arthur, was no better. His cold reply was, "Handle your own problems, probably just tense around the mother-in-law, worrying about being ordered around because she's the wife." I would never do that. It's unbearable being targeted with such hostility. So what am I supposed to say? Should I tell her to be nicer to Mom? If I do that, it'll look like I'm siding with Mom, and things will become even more strained between us. It's not about taking sides. If she dislikes me, I want to know why. If she wants nothing to do with me, she should keep her distance. Try to understand how it feels to be reluctantly asked for favors. She's the mother of your beautiful grandchild, Mom. Can't you just compromise a little? Arthur's policy of non-intervention always seemed to side with Daisy. No matter how much I pleaded, it felt like he was just brushing me off, telling me to endure it. At times, I couldn't help but vent to my close friends about these issues. Yet their responses were always something like, "That's how sons' wives are." And I continued to struggle without finding a solution. Even when advised to keep my distance, it was always Daisy who initiated contact. Whether I listened to her calmly or subtly rejected her, I found myself at a loss dealing with an unsatisfied Daisy. During this time, I was informed by Daisy about celebrating Mila's 10th birthday at a famous Chinese restaurant. Despite sending gifts for every celebration, including birthdays, I had never received a word of thanks from my eldest son's family. Instead, I was met with remarks like, "Jessica, you have no taste. It's better if you just give us cash." Naturally, I had never been invited to any of their celebration gatherings. After being told not to interfere with family events, I had refrained from getting involved. Mila's birthday celebration is at her favorite Chinese restaurant. You're coming too, right, Jessica? May I ask why you're inviting me this time? You're Mila's grandmother. It's not strange for you to come, right? Despite the usual attitude from Daisy, her words made me suspect something unpleasant. Still, if I didn't go, I would surely be blamed for not attending my granddaughter's birthday. After much thought, I decided to attend the celebration. Although I had a bad feeling, part of me hoped that maybe they were trying to mend our relationship. If my suspicions turned out to be true, I would stop involving myself with them. With that thought, I went to the Chinese restaurant on the appointed day. But as expected, my faint hope was immediately betrayed. Daisy and her family, waiting for me, looked at me and sneered with malice. "Look, there's shark fin soup, Mila's favorite. Since Grandma is paying today, let's eat a lot." Yay! When I expressed my surprise, Daisy burst out laughing as if she was greatly enjoying herself. Initially, I had thought that it wouldn't be a problem to pay for the meal considering it was to celebrate Mila's 10th birthday. However, Daisy's declaration, as if it was a given even before I offered, took me by surprise. "You're not planning to eat without paying, are you, Jessica? How brazen." I never had such intention, but you could have at least mentioned the cost beforehand. What? I told you in advance. Don't blame others for your forgetfulness. It's true what they say about memory loss in old age. The usual exchange of sarcasm made me realize that what I had hoped for was never going to happen. I decided to eat quickly and leave. As I was about to enjoy the delicious-looking dishes laid out before me, something happened. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" "What do you mean?" "I'm just trying to eat." As I reached for one of the expensive-looking dishes, Daisy slapped my hand away. Her gesture, like scolding a child for a mistake, made me sweat, wondering if I had done something rude. But seeing me flustered, Daisy laughed mockingly and said something outrageous. "Today, Jessica, you're just the wallet. So no eating." "What, Jessica? Did you really think you were invited for Mila's celebration? It's obvious you're here to pay the bill." "That's right, pay up. Be grateful we even let you sit at the table." Don't even think about touching the food. It's a joke. Daisy and Arya took turns insulting me. Seeing this, Arthur turned his face away from me and said nothing. In a situation with no allies, I felt as if my heart was being squeezed. I sighed, unable to find a solution to the relentless harassment. Feeling sick, I even started to think about just going home. Then, as if struck by an idea, Daisy dropped a single dumpling onto my empty plate. Well, can't be helped. I guess you can eat that much. Haha, Mom, a single dumpling. Jessica, that's all for you. You owe $700 for that dumpling, Grandma. That's so lame. Even Arya, a grade schooler, joined in laughing at me. Their demonic smiles, mother and daughter alike mocking me, extinguished any affection I had left for my granddaughter. This was the moment I decided to cut ties completely. I didn't feel like celebrating her birthday anymore. But as a severance, it was a small price to pay. I've had enough. I'll pay the bill and leave first. What, you're leaving already? Thanks for the meal. Please just leave me alone from now on. I was disappointed in Arthur, who wouldn't even make eye contact until the end. No matter what was said, Arthur wouldn't reprimand Daisy or even Mila. Trying to contain my intense anger, I went to pay the bill. As I approached the cash register, the flustered owner appeared. Dear customer, I'm sorry, but the course meal is still ongoing. Could you please wait a little longer? I'm sorry, but I need to leave now. Can I just pay the bill first? Didn't you like the food? No, the dumpling was delicious. Just the dumpling? Was there something in the other dishes you didn't like? Apparently, Daisy had reserved a course meal, and the owner was puzzled why I was leaving halfway through. So he approached me, wondering how to explain the situation. Feeling foolish to cover for my eldest son's family, I blurted out, I'm apparently just the wallet. Then someone tapped my shoulder from behind. It was Mila, a friend who had listened to my complaints before. I saw everything just now. It's much worse than what you told me. Mila, when did you get here? Just before you all arrived. I heard the whole thing as it happened. Mila was at the same restaurant with her colleagues from work. She happened to see the way my eldest son's family was treating me and hurried to talk to me as I was heading to the register. Seemingly more outraged than me at my son's family's behavior, Mila said, "You don't need to pay," and stopped my hand. Listen, Jessica, even if it's your grandchild, that behavior is not normal at her age. She should know better than to treat family that way. But no matter what I say, nobody listens to me, not even my son Arthur. So you're just going to let them walk all over you. Mila's words made me realize something. Looking back, my eldest son's family, unconcerned about me, was happily chatting and enjoying their meal. They probably don't even consider me as family anymore. Arthur glanced at me for a moment, but quickly averted his eyes as soon as we made eye contact. Seeing such a pitiful attitude, I felt like the person sitting there was not my son. If they don't understand words, then show them with actions. I'll help you. Thank you, Mila. Can I ask for a little help? Encouraged by Mila, I felt like I had finally found an ally. The owner, sensing the uneasy situation, nodded at me as if to say he was on my side. I'm sorry, but I only ate one dumpling. Understood. Let's do this. Based on our explanation and the owner's decision, I only had to pay for the one dumpling I ate. It felt awkward to put out just a few bills, but the owner smiled, processed the payment, and handed me the receipt. The rest of the bill will be paid by those who ate. No worries. Thank you very much. In a situation with no allies, I found unexpected salvation in the kind restaurant owner and my friend. Internally, I felt that this alone was a good enough punishment for them. But after receiving advice from Mila, I wasn't planning to let their divine retribution end there. I'm sorry and thank you so much for today. It's all right. From now on, if they treat you badly, speak up firmly, okay? Yes, thank you. Actually, I have another favor to ask if that's okay. I thanked Mila and made a request before watching her return to the restaurant. Then I headed home, ready to deliver a final blow to my eldest son's family the next day. When my doorbell rang, I was sure it was Daisy. I had anticipated that she would come to complain about the payment from yesterday. Sure enough, the monitor showed Daisy glaring at the camera with a furious expression, and I went to the door. What do you mean, Jessica? Not paying for yesterday's food and drinks? What kind of reasoning is that? Food and drinks? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. It's about Mila's birthday party yesterday. That's right. You should at least pay up. Arya, who came with Daisy, was also glaring at me. As the restaurant owner had said, my son's family had to pay for themselves and were in a panic. They hadn't brought their wallets, expecting me to pay. Arthur had to run to an ATM at a grocery store. They were quite embarrassed. Arya, showing her anger, furrowed her brow and yelled at me. Her expression was hardly one you direct at a family member. I sighed lightly before facing Daisy to talk. I only ate one dumpling yesterday, so I only paid for what I ate. The dumpling cost $700, remember? Oh, maybe you didn't hear it because of your age. With such rude attitudes from a wife and granddaughter, I didn't feel like paying anymore. As I retorted, they became even more heated and started verbally abusing me. What kind of attitude is that? Just because you're Mila's grandmother, do you think you can do anything you want? I don't want a grandma like you. Daisy pointed fingers at me as if I were some kind of villain. Arya, too, acted as though she was a hero delivering justice to evil. Was there really a reason I had to be yelled at like this? I couldn't help but ask out loud. An astonishing response came back. Hey, why do I have to be treated like this? What don't you like about me? What have I done? You haven't done anything. You know, wives just don't like their mother-in-laws. What do you mean? Just that this time I thought I'd make you useful as a wallet. Stunned by Daisy's unexpected words, I was speechless. Then, before I could signal, the door to the next room opened. Mila entered the living room. The moment they saw Mila's face, the two were speechless, their mouths agape. Listening to you all this time, is that how you treat my friend? What, miss, why are you here? Mila was the most flustered by Mila's sudden appearance. That's understandable. Mila still works as a language teacher in a certain classroom and is also the teacher of the language class that Mila attends. When I had spoken to Mila, the situation was so different from Mila's behavior in class that she had trouble believing me. But after yesterday's incident, Mila had become my ally and came to my house today. When Arya said she wished I was her real grandmother, I was so happy. Don't be deceived, Mississippi. This woman made my mom cry before. My friend wouldn't do that. Besides, you just said Mom wasn't mistreated, right? What? But Mom, Grandma was mean to you, right? Mila seemed to have believed everything Daisy told her about me without hearing the details. Lee, apparently not expecting to be overheard, looked panicked. She became visibly nervous, glancing at Arya with a troubled expression. Seeing her mother's behavior, Mila's face rapidly paled. I was speechless at Daisy's inability to come up with a better excuse for her actions. Miss, please listen to our side too. Just because she's your friend, it doesn't mean you should take Jessica's side. But I am listening. You just said she wasn't mistreated, didn't you? Well, I couldn't just stay silent when accused like that. Daisy, always quick with words, tried to make excuses and win Mila over. But Mila was judging based on the behavior she had witnessed, not on Daisy's unsubstantiated claims. With no chance of Mila siding with them, Arya, scolded by her teacher, looked like she was about to cry. Only giving one dumpling and then expecting $700 in payment? That's no way to treat family, is it? But it was my birthday, so it's only natural for Grandma to pay. That's what Mom said. Considering your attitude earlier, those kinds of words wouldn't come out unless you really look down on someone. You usually speak to your grandmother like that, don't you? Apparently, Arya was very fond of Mila and had never shown the same behavior towards me. Shocked by her favorite teacher's words, Arya seemed deeply affected. Daisy, while still glaring at me, was at a loss for words. Complaining to the teacher? How sneaky of you. It wasn't a complaint. I just happened to see what was going on. Well, I won't forgive you, Jessica. Don't think you can see your granddaughter again. Fine by me. I'd like to ask the same. Don't involve me anymore. When I retorted, Daisy left, pulling Mila's hand and looking resentful. As I watched them leave, I finally let out a sigh of relief. Seeing this, Mila patted my back. After all that, they won't be able to act so arrogantly anymore. Thank you, Mila. Sorry for always relying on you. It's fine, Jessica. They wouldn't listen to you, right? With that attitude, it's no wonder. Mila's cheerful demeanor saved me, and I was able to cut ties with Daisy and her family. It's a shame I couldn't say anything to Arthur, but I don't expect to hear anything more from Daisy. Seeing the usually confident Daisy taken aback cleared the frustration I had been carrying. Afterward, apparently Daisy and Arya got into an argument because Daisy had lied to Arya about me, leading to Mom making the teacher dislike me. Mila still couldn't be appeased, and Daisy called me to complain. Explain the situation to Mila. Is it okay for Arya to stop going to her language class? What's there to explain? Mila saw everything for herself. What more is there to say? If you admit to harassing me, then my story won't be a lie. Why? You could at least agree with me on that. No way. That's your responsibility. You should sincerely apologize to Arya. Daisy called me several times, but since she told me to stay away, I stopped answering. Arthur also called, confused about which side to take between Daisy and Arya. Disgusted with his indecisive attitude, I echoed the words once said to me, handle your own problems. Arya continues to attend Mila's class and has become much quieter since being scolded that day. Well, she was too energetic before, so maybe this is just right for her now. As a sign of reflection, I hope so. Don't worry about it, Jessica. As a teacher, I'll keep an eye on her. Thank you. I owe you so much, Mila. Don't mention it. We're friends after all, Mila said this nonchalantly. Please don't worry about it. I couldn't help but feel grateful to Mila. Next time, I plan to go out with Mila and finally enjoy the Chinese meal we missed.
Subscribe Cheating Tales Lab for more original and exclusive stories. We hope you enjoy this one. Let's begin. The Detroit skyline loomed in the rearview mirror as Jake's battered pickup rumbled down the street. His calloused hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white from the strain of a 14-hour shift. At 35, Jake's body felt older than his years, worn down by the relentless grind of construction work. As he pulled into the driveway of his modest home, Jake's eyes flickered to the empty spot where Sarah's car should be. A familiar pang of unease twisted in his gut. Things hadn't been right between them for months now. The house was quiet as Jake trudged through the front door, his work boots leaving dusty imprints on the worn linoleum. He made his way to the kitchen, drawn by the siren call of a cold beer. That's when he saw it, Sarah's phone on the counter. Its screen lit up with a notification. Jake froze, his hand halfway to the fridge handle. The notification was from a group chat labeled Girls Trip Group. His wife's recent emotional distance flashed through his mind, fueling a surge of suspicion. This isn't right, Jake muttered, even as he reached for the phone. Guilt warred with a desperate need to know as he swiped open the message. His breath caught in his throat. There, illuminated by the harsh glow of the screen, was a photo that shattered his world. Sarah, her smile radiant, leaned into the frame, but it was a hand resting possessively on her lower back that sent ice through Jake's veins. He'd recognize that ring anywhere. It belonged to his brother, Mike. With trembling fingers, Jake navigated to Sarah's text messages. The most recent exchange with Mike burned itself into his brain. Sarah, missing you. Mike, me too, darling. Can't stop thinking about our weekend in Chicago. Let's plan another getaway soon. Jake's too wrapped up in work to notice anything. The crunch of tires on gravel jolted Jake back to reality. Sarah was home. He quickly replaced the phone and retreated to the garage, his mind reeling from the betrayal. Jake grabbed a wrench and bent over his motorcycle, feigning work as he heard Sarah's key in the lock. His heart hammered in his chest, a toxic mix of rage and heartbreak threatening to overflow. Jake! Sarah's voice called out. You home? In here, he managed to grunt, not trusting himself to say more. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her smile faltering as she took in Jake's tense posture. Everything okay? Jake nodded tersely, keeping his eyes fixed on the bike's engine. Long day. Gonna tinker for a bit before dinner. As Sarah's footsteps faded, Jake's grip on the wrench tightened until his knuckles turned white. His world had just imploded, and he had no idea what to do next. The next morning dawned gray and dreary, matching Jake's mood perfectly. He arrived at the construction site early, desperate for the distraction of physical labor. But as he maneuvered the crane into position, his mind kept drifting to Sarah and Mike. The betrayal ate at him, making it hard to focus. "Jake, watch it!" Tom's shout snapped Jake back to reality, just as the crane's load swung dangerously close to a group of workers. Jake's heart raced as he quickly corrected course, narrowly avoiding disaster. Tom stormed over, his face thunderous. "My office! Now!" The foreman barked. Jake followed Tom to the cramped trailer that served as the site office, bracing himself for the inevitable ass-chewing. To his surprise, Tom's expression softened as he closed the door behind him. "What's going on with you, Jake?" Tom asked, concern evident in his voice. "You've been one of my best guys for years. I've never seen you this distracted." Jake debating how much to reveal. "Just personal stuff. Won't happen again." Tom studied him for a moment. "Look, I don't need details, but if you need to take a day or two to sort things out, do it. Can't have you endangering yourself or the crew." Jake nodded, grateful for the unexpected understanding. "Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it, but I'd rather keep working, keep my mind off things." "All right." Tom relented. "But one more close call, and you're on mandatory leave." Got it. Jake agreed. As he left the trailer, Jake overheard a group of his co-workers huddled together, their voices low and concerned. "Third site hit this month." One of them was saying, "Whoever's behind these break-ins knows their stuff." Jake slowed his pace, listening intently. "Gotta be an inside job." Vince, the site's elderly security guard, chimed in. "They're bypassing security systems like they built M themselves." The conversation shifted as Jake approached, but the seed of an idea had already taken root in his mind. If there was a way to get involved in these thefts, it could be his ticket out, a chance at revenge and financial security all in one. After his shift ended, Jake found himself in front of the Rusty Nail, a dive bar he hadn't visited in years. The neon sign flickered weakly in the twilight as Jake pushed open the grimy door. The smell of stale beer and cigarettes hit him like a wall. Jake scanned the dim interior until he spotted a familiar face hunched over the bar. "Daryl," Jake called out as he approached. The man's head snapped up, bloodshot eyes widening in recognition. "Well, I'll be damned. Jake Buford, as I live and breathe. What brings you to this fine establishment?" Jake settled onto the cracked vinyl bar stool next to Daryl. "Just felt like a change of scenery," he said casually. "How have you been?" Daryl snorted. "Oh, staying busy." His eyes darted around the bar before he leaned in closer. "Word is you're still in construction. Bet you hear all sorts of interesting things." Jake's pulse quickened. This was the opening he'd been hoping for. He signaled the bartender for a beer before responding. "Funny you should mention that," Jake said, keeping his voice low. "There's been some talk about break-ins at job sites. High-end equipment getting lifted. Sounds like a pretty sophisticated operation." Daryl's eyebrows shot up. "That's so? Hypothetically speaking, of course. But a guy might be interested in more details about something like that, if he knew the right people to talk to." Jake took a long pull from his beer, weighing his next words carefully. "Hypothetically, a guy might be looking to get involved in something like that, if the price was right." A slow grin spread across Daryl's face. "Well now, that's mighty interesting. Hypothetically speaking, of course. Why don't we step outside for a smoke and continue this fascinating hypothetical conversation?" As they exited into the alley behind the bar, Jake felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He was stepping into dangerous territory, but the thought of Sarah and Mike's betrayal steeled his resolve. This was his chance to take control, to hit back at a world that had sucker-punched him. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake threw himself into gathering intelligence. Every spare moment was devoted to uncovering the depths of Sarah and Mike's betrayal, while simultaneously laying the groundwork for his own illicit activities. Jake volunteered for night shifts at various construction sites, using the time to study security systems and identify valuable equipment. His co-workers chalked up his sudden enthusiasm to trying to escape whatever was troubling him at home. They had no idea how right they were. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, Jake found himself parked across the street from the Moonlight Motel, a seedy establishment on the outskirts of town. Like clockwork, Sarah's car would pull in at 7 p.m., followed shortly by Mike's flashy sports car. They always took room 212. The first time Jake saw them together, laughing as they hurried into the room, he nearly lost it. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly he thought it might snap. But as the rage subsided, a cold determination took its place. He would make them pay, but on his terms. One Tuesday afternoon, Jake found himself standing outside Mike's apartment, a set of lockpicks in his trembling hands. He'd learned the skill in his misspent youth, never imagining he'd need to use it against his own brother. The lock gave way with a soft click. Jake slipped inside, his heart pounding. He worked quickly, planting hidden cameras in strategic locations. As he searched for any additional evidence of Mike's betrayal, Jake stumbled upon a treasure trove of incriminating financial documents. Apparently, Mike's infidelity wasn't his only secret. Jake uncovered clear evidence of tax evasion and fraudulent business dealings. It was almost too perfect. Just as Jake finished photographing the damning paperwork, he heard voices in the hallway. Panic gripped him as he recognized Mike's laugh. Jake barely made it to the stairwell before the apartment door opened. Pressed against the wall, Jake held his breath as Mike passed by, Sarah's favorite flowers clutched in his hand. The sight reignited Jake's fury, cementing his resolve. There would be no mercy. That night, as Sarah slept peacefully beside him, Jake hunched over his laptop in the dim light of the basement. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he researched wilderness survival techniques and remote cabin rentals. A plan was taking shape in his mind, a way to exact his revenge while securing his own future. It was risky, potentially devastating if it went wrong. But as Jake glanced at the wedding photo on his desk, Sarah's smiling face now a mockery of their vows, he knew he had nothing left to lose. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, very soon, he would spring the trap. And when the dust settled, Jake would emerge victorious or go down in flames trying. Jake sat in the darkness of his basement, the glow of his laptop screen casting eerie shadows across his face. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly as he prepared to set his plan in motion. With a deep breath, he clicked send on an anonymous tip to the IRS, detailing Mike's financial irregularities. "Let's see how you like being stabbed in the back, brother," Jake muttered, a smile twisting his features. Over the next few weeks, Jake's life became a carefully choreographed dance of deception. By day, he was the model employee, throwing himself into his work with renewed vigor. But as soon as darkness fell, he transformed into something else entirely. Using the knowledge gleaned from his night shifts, Jake orchestrated a series of small-scale thefts at various construction sites across Detroit. He moved like a ghost, bypassing security systems with ease and selecting only the most valuable, portable equipment. After each heist, Jake would meet Daryl in dimly lit parking lots or seedy bars to fence the stolen goods. The wads of cash he received in return felt like victory in his hands. "You're a natural at this, Jake," Daryl remarked one night, eyes glinting with admiration and a hint of wariness. "Just don't get too greedy, yeah?" Jake nodded, pocketing the money. "Don't worry. I know exactly what I'm doing." At home, Sarah's behavior shifted. She became increasingly distant, her eyes darting nervously whenever Jake entered the room. Her excuses to leave the house grew more frequent and paper-thin. "Book club again?" Jake asked one evening, his tone carefully neutral as Sarah grabbed her keys. "Yeah, we're discussing a really complex novel. Might run late," Sarah replied, unable to meet his gaze. As she hurried out the door, Jake allowed himself a small, bitter laugh. He played the role of the unsuspecting husband to perfection, all the while feeling the weight of his growing emergency fund hidden in the basement. Mike paced his office, phone pressed to his ear, What do you mean an audit? There must be some mistake. The IRS agent on the other end remained unmoved. I'm sorry, Mr. Buford, but we received information that requires a thorough investigation of your finances. All your accounts will be frozen until we complete our review. As Mike's world began to crumble around him, Sarah found herself increasingly alone. Her calls and texts went unanswered, their clandestine meetings abruptly canceled. Guilt and fear gnawed at her, driving her to seek comfort in the last place she expected, Jake's arms. I'm sorry I've been so distant lately, Sarah whispered one night, curling up next to Jake on the couch. Work's been crazy and I feel like we've lost our connection. Jake's arm tightened around her, his face a mask of concern and understanding. Inside, his heart raced with a mixture of triumph and disgust. I've been feeling it too, he murmured, stroking her hair. Maybe we need to get away for a bit, just the two of us. Reconnect. Sarah's eyes lit up. Really? That sounds wonderful. Where were you thinking? Jake smiled, the trap snapping shut. I found this great little cabin upstate. Totally secluded, beautiful scenery. Perfect for leaving all our problems behind for a weekend. As Sarah enthusiastically agreed, Jake felt a twinge of something: regret, sadness for what might have been. He pushed it aside, focusing on the next phase of his plan. At work, Jake's productivity soared. He channeled all his anger and pain into his job, impressing Tom and his fellow workers with his dedication. I don't know what's got into you lately, Jake, Tom remarked one afternoon, clapping him on the shoulder. But keep it up. I'm thinking you might be ready for more responsibility around here. Jake nodded, allowing himself a moment of genuine pride. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity. As Jake left Tom's office, he noticed a new face on the site, a sharp-eyed woman in a crisp suit, talking intently with Vince, the security guard. That's Detective Carter, Vince informed him later, his voice low. She's investigating all these break-ins. Interviewed half the crew already. Jake's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. Yeah? What'd she think happened? Vince shrugged. Not sure, but she's thorough. Been asking a lot about security protocols, work schedules, that sort of thing. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Well, I hope they catch whoever's responsible. It's making everyone nervous. As he walked away, Jake's mind raced. He'd need to be extra careful now, with the police sniffing around. But he was too close to back out now. The cabin trip was only days away, and everything was falling into place. The night before the cabin trip, Jake's nerves were on edge. He'd volunteered for the late shift, telling Sarah he wanted to tie up loose ends before their getaway. In reality, he had one last, crucial task to complete. Under the cover of darkness, Jake moved swiftly through the construction site. His intimate knowledge of the security systems allowed him to disable them with ease. He worked methodically, gathering a significant haul of expensive equipment. But this time, instead of fencing the goods, Jake carefully planted evidence. A cigarette, but with Mike's preferred brand. A scrap of paper with numbers matching Mike's handwriting. A single strand of hair that could have come from either brother. As he finished, Jake took a moment to survey his handiwork. It was almost poetic, he thought, how perfectly everything was coming together. The next morning, Jake and Sarah set out for the cabin. The car ride was tense, filled with awkward small talk and long silences. As they wound their way up into the mountains, Sarah's phone began to buzz incessantly. Everything okay? Jake asked, feigning concern as Sarah's face grew increasingly pale. It's Mike, Sarah stammered, her voice shaking. He says the IRS has frozen all his accounts, and now the police are investigating him for some kind of theft ring. Jake, I don't understand what's happening. Jake reached over, squeezing her hand. Hey, it's all right. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Why don't we turn off our phones for the weekend? Give ourselves a chance to focus on us, like we planned. Sarah hesitated, then nodded, switching off her phone. Jake did the same, feeling a surge of anticipation. There was no turning back now. As they arrived at the cabin, Jake marveled at how peaceful it looked, the perfect setting for the storm he was about to unleash. They spent the afternoon settling in, taking a short hike and preparing dinner together. As night fell, Jake knew it was time. "Sarah," he said softly, setting down his wine glass, "there's something we need to talk about." The color drained from Sarah's face as Jake slowly, methodically laid out the evidence of her affair. Photos from the hidden cameras, printouts of text messages, hotel receipts, a damning trail of betrayal. Sarah broke down, tears streaming down her face as she confessed everything. "I'm so sorry, Jake," she sobbed. "I never meant for any of this to happen. Please, you have to believe me. I love you, I do." Jake let the silence stretch, watching Sarah squirm. Finally, he spoke, his voice surprisingly gentle. I think maybe we can work through this. It won't be easy, but if we both want it." Sarah's eyes lit up with desperate hope. "Really? Oh, Jake, I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll quit my job, whatever it takes." Jake nodded, standing up. "Let's take some time to process. How about I make us both a drink? Something to calm our nerves." As he walked to the kitchen, Jake allowed himself a small, victorious smile. From his pocket, he withdrew a small vial, a powerful sedative courtesy of Daryl's connections. With steady hands, he prepared 2 glasses, adding the colorless, odorless liquid to Sarah's. Returning to the living room, Jake handed Sarah her drink. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. Sarah took a long sip, relief evident on her face. "To new beginnings," she echoed. As they talked, Jake watched Sarah's eyes grow heavy, her speech slurring slightly. Within minutes, she was unconscious on the couch. Jake stood over her, a complex mix of emotions swirling in his chest. Part of him wanted to shake her awake, to scream and rage at her for destroying their life together. But a colder, more calculating part knew that this was just a beginning. He checked Sarah's pulse, ensuring the sedative hadn't been too strong. Satisfied, he began to move quickly, setting the final stages of his plan into motion. The first rays of dawn crept through the cabin windows as Jake stirred. He blinked, momentarily disoriented, before the events of the previous night came rushing back. Sarah lay motionless on the couch, still under the influence of the powerful sedative. Jake moved quickly, gathering his things and erasing all traces of his presence. He paused at the door, looking back at Sarah's sleeping form. For a moment, he felt a flicker of doubt, but he squashed it ruthlessly. There was no going back now. The drive back to Detroit was a blur of adrenaline and anticipation. Jake's mind raced, going over every detail of his plan. He pulled into the construction site parking lot just as the early shift was arriving. "Jake, thought you were on vacation," Tom called out, surprise evident in his voice. Jake feigned embarrassment. "Yeah, about that. Sarah wasn't feeling well, so we came back early. Figured I might as well get some work done." Tom nodded sympathetically. "Sorry to hear that. Well, we can always use the extra hands." As Jake immersed himself in work, he couldn't help but wonder what was unfolding back at the cabin. He imagined Sarah waking up, confused and alone. The thought brought a satisfaction. Miles away, Mike Buford was a man on the edge. His carefully constructed life was crumbling around him. The IRS audit had frozen his accounts, and now the police were sniffing around, asking pointed questions about construction site thefts. In a moment of desperation, Mike remembered Sarah mentioning a cabin getaway. It was a long shot, but he was out of options. He needed help, and Sarah was the only person he could turn to now. With shaking hands, Mike threw some clothes into a duffel bag and headed for his car. He'd have to use cash, avoid main roads. As he pulled out of his driveway, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he was driving straight into a trap. Back at the cabin, Sarah's eyes fluttered open, her head pounded, and her mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton. She sat up slowly, trying to piece together what had happened. Where was Jake? A noise outside made her freeze. Footsteps on the porch, then a familiar voice calling her name. "Mike!" Sarah croaked, stumbling to the door. "What are you doing here? Where's Jake?" Mike burst in, his eyes wild with panic. "Sarah, thank God. We've got to get out of here. Something's gone terribly wrong." As Mike rambled about frozen accounts and police investigations, Sarah's fog began to clear. She remembered Jake confronting her about the affair, showing her evidence. But after that, nothing. "Mike, stop," Sarah interrupted. "Jake knows. About us. He had pictures, messages, everything." Mike's face drained of color. "What? How? Oh, God." "Sarah, I think we've been set up." As the reality of their situation sank in, Sarah and Mike looked at each other with growing horror. They'd walked right into an elaborate trap, and they had no idea how to escape it. Miles away, Jake slipped away from the job site, a burner phone clutched in his hand. With steady fingers, he dialed the police tip line. "I'd like to report a sighting of 2 fugitives," he said, disguising his voice. "At a cabin off Route 7. You'd better hurry. They looked ready to run." Sarah's hands shook as she tried to start her car. Nothing, not even a sputter. "It won't start," she called to Mike, panic rising in her voice. Mike slammed the hood of his own vehicle in frustration. "Mine's dead, too. He must have sabotaged them." The distant wail of police sirens sent a jolt of terror through them both. Without a word, they turned and ran for the dense forest surrounding the cabin. Branches whipped at their faces as they crashed through the underbrush. Sarah's fashionable boots, meant for city streets, not wilderness flight, threatened to betray her with every step. "We can't outrun them," Mike panted. "We need to find somewhere to hide." As the sounds of pursuit grew closer, Sarah and Mike pushed deeper into the unfamiliar terrain, desperation lending speed to their tired legs. Back in Detroit, Jake played his part to perfection. He paced the floor of the police station, the very picture of a concerned husband and brother. Detective Lynn Carter watched him with sharp eyes. "Mr. Buford, when was the last time you saw your wife?" "Yesterday morning. We were supposed to go to a cabin for the weekend, but I got called into work at the last minute. Sarah went ahead without me." He paused, letting his voice crack slightly. "I should have gone with her. If I had known." "And your brother?" Carter pressed. "When did you last have contact with him?" Jake's expression darkened convincingly. "Not for weeks. We had a falling out. I never imagined he'd be involved in something like this." As Jake spun his tale of betrayal and shock, he could see the sympathy in the eyes of the officers around him. Even the hard-nosed detective Carter seemed to be softening. "Mr. Buford," she said, her tone gentler now, "I know this is difficult, but we need to know about the cabin. Any information you can give us could be crucial." Jake hesitated, as if wrestling with his conscience. I don't want to believe Sarah's involved in Mike's crimes, but if there's any chance she's in danger or being held against her will." He took a deep breath. "I'll tell you everything I know." As Jake reluctantly provided details about the cabin's location, a flurry of activity erupted around him. Officers rushed to coordinate with state police, organizing a large-scale manhunt. Jake sank into a chair, accepting a sympathetic pat on the shoulder from a young officer. Inside, he felt a surge of triumph. Everything was going according to plan. In the forest, Sarah and Mike huddled beneath a rocky overhang, listening to the sounds of searchers in the distance. They were cold, hungry, and utterly lost. "How could we have been so stupid?" Sarah whispered, her voice bitter with self-recrimination. Mike said nothing, his eyes fixed on the tree-line. They both knew there was no good answer to that question. 3 days. It felt like an eternity to Sarah and Mike as they stumbled through the wilderness, evading search parties and struggling to survive. The affair that had once seemed so exciting now lay in tatters, destroyed by the harsh reality of their situation. "This is all your fault," Sarah spat, her once perfect hair matted with leaves and dirt. "If you hadn't been so careless with your finances." "My fault." Mike shot back. You're the one who couldn't keep your story straight. Jake must have suspected something for months. Their bitter argument was cut short by the distant sound of helicopter blades. They froze, exchanging a look of pure terror before scrambling for better cover. Meanwhile, back in Detroit, Jake was being hailed as a hero. His discovery of the construction site, theft ring, had impressed everyone from his co-workers to the police. "Jake, my office." Tom called out one morning. Jake entered, his face a careful mask of humility. "What's up, Tom?" The foreman grinned, holding out his hand. "Congratulations, Site Supervisor Buford. You've more than earned this." As Jake shook Tom's hand, accepting the promotion he'd long desired, he felt a twinge of something, not quite regret, but a sense of the enormity of what he'd done. He pushed it aside. This was what he'd wanted, wasn't it? That night, Jake made one final move. Using another burner phone, he called in one last anonymous tip. "I saw 2 people matching the fugitive's description," he reported, his voice disguised. They were heading towards the old mine shaft off County Road 22. The police and rescue teams converged on the abandoned mine, believing they had Sarah and Mike cornered at last. Deep in the mine's twisting tunnels, Sarah and Mike heard the approaching sirens. The realization that they were trapped hit them like a physical blow. "There has to be another way out," Mike said desperately, pushing deeper into the darkness. Sarah hesitated, fear and exhaustion warring within her. "Mike, wait." But it was too late. Mike's frantic scramble triggered a cascade of loose rock. Sarah screamed as the tunnel mouth collapsed, debris raining down around them. When the dust settled, Sarah found herself pinned beneath a fallen beam, pain shooting through her leg. Mike was nowhere to be seen. The rescue team found her quickly, drawn by her cries for help. As they worked to free her, Sarah's mind raced. How had it all gone so wrong? Hours later, Sarah lay in a hospital bed, an 4 drip in her arm, treating her for dehydration and minor injuries. Detective Carter stood at the foot of the bed, her expression stern. "Mrs. Buford, I need you to tell me exactly what happened," Carter said. Sarah closed her eyes, the weight of her actions crashing down upon her. Slowly, haltingly, she began to confess everything. Jake arrived at the hospital, playing the part of the concerned husband perfectly. But as he approached Sarah's room, he heard her voice, thick with tears, spilling every secret. He stepped back, unseen, a complex mix of emotions swirling within him. It was done. Over. He'd won, hadn't he? The following weeks passed in a blur. Sarah, granted immunity for her testimony, watched as her life fell apart. Friends and family turned their backs on her, disgusted by her betrayal. Jake filed for divorce, citing infidelity. The proceedings were quick, given Sarah's public admission of guilt. Mike's trial became a media sensation. Jake sat in the courtroom, watching as his brother's long history of fraud and the elaborate construction site, theft ring, were laid bare for all to see. 6 months later, Jake stood outside the courthouse, watching as Mike was led away to begin his 15-year sentence. He felt empty. The revenge he'd so meticulously planned had left him hollow. As he turned to leave, he found himself face to face with Detective Carter. "Mr. Buford," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Those anonymous tips were awfully convenient, weren't they?" Jake met her gaze steadily. "I suppose the tipster was just observant. Lucky for everyone involved." Carter studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. "Lucky indeed," she said finally. "Take care, Mr. Buford." As Jake walked away, he could feel the weight of Carter's suspicions on his back. But he'd covered his tracks well. There was nothing to connect him to the elaborate scheme he'd orchestrated. He'd achieved his revenge without legal consequences. But as Jake stepped into his new apartment, he realized the cost had been higher than he'd ever imagined. His marriage, his brother, and perhaps a part of himself, all sacrificed on the altar of vengeance. Jake looked at himself in the mirror, Site Supervisor badge glinting on his chest. He was determined to rebuild his life, to make something of this second chance. But as he stared at his reflection, He knew he'd been forever changed by the choices he'd made. The man who looked back at him was a stranger, harder, colder, and carrying the weight of secrets that would never see the light of day. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
I was ready for work, seated at the breakfast table with my coffee and the morning paper, while Janet was still getting dressed in the bedroom. This morning seemed just like any other workday of the past year. As I skimmed the front page, there it was, right in the middle, as Carmine had predicted last night. Carmine always follows through on his promises. The news article reported a man found executed in his garage. Robert Toldson, an employee of Calcas Realty Agency, was found dead, having been thumped and then strangled. Janet also works at Calcas Realty. Currently, the police have no suspects, and the investigation is just beginning. There was no need to read further. I folded the paper and placed it on the table where Janet always sits. A warm, comforting feeling washed over me as I contemplated the events leading up to this morning. Sipping my coffee, I watched as Janet entered the breakfast area. My, was she beautiful. My wife of 5 years looked even more stunning today than she did 7 years ago when we first met. There were no exchanged greetings as she poured herself a cup of coffee. It's hard to believe how much our marriage had declined in the past year. Our eyes met briefly, and I smiled slightly as I acknowledged her arrival. She said nothing to me, continuing a pattern that had persisted for the past 2 months after our major argument about her increased working hours. She seemed to withdraw into herself, displaying a coldness that contrasted sharply with her warmth during our courtship. I missed that closeness dearly. Now it seemed like it was all coming to an end. Janet picked up the paper in one hand and her coffee cup in the other. Her eyes scanned the headlines, and suddenly she spat out her coffee, her eyes fixed on the article about Robert Toldson's homicide. "Oh God, no," she cried out, looking as if she were about to vomit as she rushed to the bathroom. I sat there in silence, knowing there was nothing I needed to say to her about the subject. Taking a deep breath, I stood up, placed my coffee cup in the dishwasher, and grabbed my briefcase. I went out to the garage and got into my car, not bothering to check on Janet's well-being. It didn't matter to me anymore how she was feeling. Now, let me introduce myself. My name is John Cannella, but my friends call me JC. I'm 29 years old, of Sicilian descent in the Italian section of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My youth was mostly spent getting into trouble with a gang of other young Italian boys. We fancied ourselves as the Junior Mafia. I'll skip over most of the other misadventures we got into and focus on the one event that significantly changed my direction. Carmine Vitalio and I were closer than two natural brothers. We were the same age and hung out with the same group of guys. The main difference between Carmine and me was brain power. I won't claim Carmine was unintelligent or anything of the sort. It's just that he seemed incapable of avoiding trouble with the law. Despite our shared misdeeds, he was the one who typically got caught by the police. One evening, Carmine and I broke into a warehouse near the dock, hoping to steal some items for quick cash. The security guards must have spotted us entering through a side window because they were waiting as we tried to leave with several boxes of MP3 players. One guard nabbed Carmine just as I turned, while another tried to grab me. I pushed a box into his face and then leaped onto the other guard's back, striking him on the side of his head with all my strength. As he released Carmine, I pulled him to the ground, urging him to flee as fast as he could. Carmine ran off, leaving me behind. The second guard recovered and grabbed me from behind, and there wasn't much of a struggle after that. The guards roughed me up until the cops arrived. When they showed up, they laughed with the guards as they examined my bruised and bloodied body. I was taken to the police station and held in a cell until my parents came to get me released. Long story short, I never revealed the identity of my accomplice in the warehouse. I received 2 weeks in jail and probation. Carmine called me multiple times to apologize for leaving me behind, but I reassured him it was fine, considering his prior record could have landed him in jail for much longer. He vowed to make it up to me, no matter how long it took. My parents were furious and embarrassed by my arrest. My dad disciplined me with his leather belt until I was almost bleeding, and then they decided to enroll me in St. Peter's Catholic High School to straighten me out. Needless to say, the nuns and the priest did an excellent job of disciplining me. By my senior year, I had changed my lifestyle. One of the priests who mentored me encouraged me to pursue a different path, so I left the neighborhood gang and eventually performed well enough to be accepted to Penn State again. In short, I succeeded in college and graduated with a degree in human resources. Finding a job with a reputable company after graduation was easy. For once, my parents were proud of me. Though I dated numerous women in college, I wasn't ready for a serious commitment. It wasn't until 3 years after graduating that I met Janet Ficanio, who made me reconsider my bachelorhood. We met at a seminar for HR representatives. Afterward, I got her phone number and promised to call her, which seemed to please her. Janet was unlike any other woman I had dated, with a multifaceted personality. At times, she reminded me of Chris Costner's character in The 3 Faces of Eve. The trait I least admired about Janet was her stubbornness. Once she formed an opinion on an issue, nothing could dissuade her from her belief, no matter how misguided it might be. Our dating experience was characterized by periods of closeness, followed by distance. We refrained from engaging in carnal activity. Within the first year of our relationship, I learned of Janet's abandonment as an infant. Her mother left her in a church pew and departed from her life, leading to her upbringing in orphanages and foster homes. I firmly believe that the absence of maternal love and care during her formative years contributed significantly to Janet's personality struggles. Despite her challenges, Janet remained the most affectionate and warm-hearted person I had ever known. During our early years together, my parents did not support my relationship with Janet. Throughout our courtship, they cautioned me about becoming too involved with her, but I disregarded their advice. Janet and I exchanged vows in a modest ceremony at our local church. We both agreed to postpone starting a family until we were financially stable, and Janet could transition to being a full-time mother, a decision that my parents disapproved of. Trouble emerged in our marriage during the 3rd year when Janet's company was acquired by a larger corporation, resulting in the loss of her job. She struggled with depression due to losing a job she valued. Although we weren't facing financial hardship, it took several months for Janet to secure a new job, which she wasn't enthusiastic about, an office manager position at the Calcas Realty Agency. I made an effort to support Janet during her period of unemployment, but at times, I felt she resented my fulfilling job while she settled for less. She experienced significant mood swings, particularly during her monthly cycle. After a few months at Calcas, she gradually regained her usual pleasant demeanor. Our situation improved, including our bed life, which had suffered during her unemployment. There were moments in our bedroom when I sensed Janet was trying hard to compensate for the rough patch by being more assertive in our lovemaking. For about 9 months, I didn't complain, and our married life thrived. Janet became more enthusiastic about her job and even pursued a home study course in real estate. I was pleased with her transformation and the loving wife she was to me. Then, amidst challenging circumstances, came both good and bad news. The good news was my steady advancement up the management ladder at my company. After 5 years with them, my future looked promising. However, a merger with an Atlanta-based company led to significant changes in my job responsibilities. The Atlanta company was to be integrated into our corporate structure, giving me the responsibility to train their personnel and make necessary staff reductions. I was excited about the new challenges, but the downside was that I would be traveling more frequently and for longer periods away from home. Janet was not pleased with the prospect of my increased time on the road, even though I made efforts to be home for weekends during longer trips. Initially, Janet's anger about my frequent absences seemed to be appeased, but, as is often the case, complications arose. Gradually, my return home on weekends proved insufficient to compensate for my extended time away. Janet entrenched herself in a stubborn mindset, accusing me of enjoying my absence and even insinuating that I might have a lover in Atlanta. Despite my efforts, including calling her during the day and sending flowers and humorous cards, her aloofness persisted. Completing the staff training in Atlanta took nearly 6 months, marking the conclusion of my travels. Additionally, I received a promotion at corporate headquarters, expecting these changes to improve Janet's perception of me. However, it appeared I was mistaken. Once I stopped traveling, Janet increased her workload at the agency. When I questioned her about it, She sarcastically remarked that it was her turn to work for a promotion and suggested it was time for me to experience solitude in the evenings. Our closeness suffered. 2 weeks ago, Janet informed me that she and her colleagues would be away for the weekend, attending a developer's session for high-rise condominiums near the riverfront. She deemed it essential for her career advancement without consulting me about her absence, leaving no room for discussion. Even though I stopped running with the junior mafia back in high school, I stayed close with some of my best pals, especially Carmine. I rang him up and asked if he wanted to catch the Steelers versus Raiders game on Sunday. Without hesitation, he agreed, knowing how to score the best tickets for Steelers games. I mentioned Janet's business trip, so Carmine suggested I spend the weekend with him and the guys, catching up on neighborhood gossip. The idea of a weekend away from home sounded fantastic, so I didn't bother telling Janet my plans. Friday morning was chilly, and over breakfast, I casually inquired about reaching Janet while she was away. She coolly brushed off the idea, saying she'd be with influential people and didn't want interruptions. It felt like she saw me as a nagging parent rather than a husband. I let it go, and later that day, Janet left for Atlantic City. Meeting up with Carmine was a real reunion. It had been over a year since we last hung out. I was one of the few who managed to leave the old neighborhood without ending up behind bars. Carmine also mentioned a debt he owed me, promising to help me out whenever I needed. Saturday night, we hit up the Sweet Kitty Cat Lounge on the southeast side, a strip joint reminiscent of the Bada Bing Club from The Sopranos. The place was packed with scantily clad dancers, just like in the show. A young woman, who seemed not much older than her 18th birthday, approached and danced provocatively in front of me. Carmine mentioned that she was available for the night, placing emphasis on the idea that she could be mine if I wanted. During this, he engaged in inappropriate physical contact. In response, I expressed my commitment to marital vows, acknowledging my temptation, but affirming that loyalty and fidelity hold significance for me. I declined the advances of the alluring stripper, and she moved on to another interested male customer. Carmine, expressing disbelief, commented that I seemed really serious about the fidelity thing. I affirmed my stance, stating that without fidelity, there would be nothing. No love, no marriage. The next morning brought the typical cold, windy Pittsburgh weather, but that didn't deter the horde of fans trekking to Three Rivers Stadium for the Steelers versus Raiders game. The bitter rivalry between these two football teams borders on gang warfare since the Steelers snatched victory from the jaws of defeat in one of the NFL's most memorable moments. With a fortunate bounce, Franco Harris found himself on the end of an unlikely reception, changing the outcome of a fantastic defensive struggle with the Oakland Raiders in the first-ever playoff game at Pittsburgh's Three Rivers Stadium. Neither team has forgotten that legacy. It's a good thing weapons are not permitted on the playing field. The Steelers weren't having a great year at this point in the season, with a record of 5 wins and 5 losses. Today marked the biggest game of the season, with the silver and black back in town. It was hard headbanging all afternoon on the football field. I was getting hoarse from all the shouting and screaming, but the final score was Steelers 21, Raiders 20. The day couldn't have ended on a better note, or so I thought. Despite Carmine's invitation to celebrate, I had to bow out and tell him another time. Tomorrow would be a hard day at the office, and I knew I didn't need a hangover on top of all the other job pressures. Besides, Janet was coming home this evening, and I wanted to be there when she got home. However, Janet did not come home Sunday night. I left for work Monday morning with serious doubts in my mind about the latest developments in my marriage. There had been a sense of impending doom whenever I thought deeply about the state of the relationship between Janet and myself. Sure, there were rough patches in all marriages, but maybe our marriage had decayed into something more than just a rough patch. The workday was as hectic as expected when I left home in the morning, with several high-level meetings and a persecution lawsuit brought against the company high on my agenda. It wasn't until 5:30 that I had a chance to sit down and check my emails. There were a dozen emails from the staff, along with the latest information on the lawsuit. Near the end of the list of emails, there was one titled, "Who was the last one to know?" As I opened the email, anticipating a humorous animated cartoon, I was suddenly confronted with a photo of Janet and another man engaged in a passionate embrace and a lip-locked kiss. At the bottom of the photo, there was a text message that simply suggested, Want to know what happened after this? Click on the next link. A cold chill raised up my spine as I hesitated for a moment, staring at the photo of Janet kissing another man. Then I clicked on the next link. The screen flashed up another photo. This time, Janet and the man she was kissing were both unclothed and standing together in a motel room. Again, at the bottom of the photo was a text message that simply said, "Want to know what happened after this? Click on the next link." My hand was trembling. There was a tightness in my throat and chest as the unclothed image of my wife burned itself into my brain. There was a part of me that did not want to see the next photo. Still, I knew I had to click on the link. The next photo was the end of my marriage, with Janet on the bed on all fours, with the same man as in the other two photos, displaying an expression of lust and ecstasy on her face. The sole woman I ever wholeheartedly loved turned out to be an unfaithful adulteress. I placed my love and trust in her entirely, and now she was tearing my heart from my chest. The text at the photo's bottom read, "Prick provided by Robert Toldson." My worst nightmare had been thrust in my face. Undoubtedly, Janet's recent coldness wasn't merely a wife upset with her husband. It resembled rigor mortis setting into our dying marriage. What followed? Anger and rage. For me, it was a calm resolve, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. Revenge settled into my mind, as infidelity and betrayal wouldn't stand in my lifetime. Two people would pay dearly for knowingly heaping insults upon me. My initial thoughts revolved around the person sending incriminating emails. No name or indication of the sender's identity. Questions echoed in my head. Why send this email? What did they hope to gain by exposing my wife's infidelity? Were they friends or enemies of Janet? I'd have to address these questions later. I inserted a CD into my computer, copied the email and 3 photos, then deleted it. A scrubber program erased all evidence from my hard drive. Sitting back in my swivel chair, making sense of Janet's betrayal, I could only attribute it to her multiple personalities. Yet, if she wanted a divorce, I would have granted it, and we both could have walked away from this marriage wreck. But now, my revenge would be swift and complete. I'd show no mercy to either of them. The plan began to solidify in my mind. Leaving the office, I found a payphone around the corner. Dialing an untraceable pay-as-you-go cell phone, I informed Carmine that I believed it was time for me to collect on the debt he owed me. Upon returning home around 7:30, I found Janet already there, watching TV. She didn't rush to greet me but commented on my late arrival, saying I was coming home late. In response, I noted that she was also coming home late as I moved to the kitchen. Silence hung between us. I grabbed a beer and headed to my office, ensuring to lock the door. In our country, a person convicted of a capital crime usually gets one of 2 sentences: the pass-away penalty or life in prison. My revenge plan involved 1 pass-away penalty and 1 life sentence. I needed some quiet time to finalize my revenge plan. Carmine would handle Mr. Robert Toldson, and I'd personally settle the score with Janet. To make the revenge appear as a simple case of a wife leaving her husband, I sent flowers to Janet's office and made dinner reservations near her workplace. I left messages for her to meet me, but she never showed up. I instructed the maitre d' to give our table to someone else, ensuring he'd remember my wife standing me up. Janet returned home that evening without offering any explanation or reason for missing our dinner reservation. The fact of the matter was, I had no interest in anything she might have said in defiance. The die had been cast, and the wheels of revenge were set in motion. The following day, a courier came to my office and handed me an envelope marked personal and confidential. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper with a bold heading instructing to destroy it after reading. The first sentence on the paper advised me to secure an airtight alibi for the upcoming night. The second sentence provided a name, Carlos Mandara, and a phone number. I read and reread the phone number until I had it memorized. The paper was then sent through the shredder, and I collected the shredded pieces to be discreetly dropped into various trash cans outside the office building that evening. I arrived home before Janet, changed clothes, poured a tall Jim Beam, and sat down to listen to some smooth jazz. The TV remained off. It was to be my night as king of my castle. Janet had to find her own entertainment. There was no confrontation when she got home. She quickly assessed the scene and turned around, walking out the door again. I couldn't care less about her destination, whether out to eat or to meet Robert Toldson. The sand in the hourglass was almost empty for both of them. I was in bed when Janet finally returned, slipping quietly alongside me. Silence was the loudest noise before I fell asleep. Thursday evenings were the usual poker night for some guys from work, held in the back room of the old Stagecoach bar. This served as my airtight alibi for the rest of the evening. This time, I was the one slipping into bed early in the morning. The clock on my nightstand read 2:35 as I pulled the covers over me. Not a sound or movement from Janet. Falling asleep wasn't difficult, even though I knew what had taken place earlier that evening. Now that Robert Toldson had faced his pass-away penalty, it was time to mete out punishment to the second perpetrator. Immediate action wasn't required for the life imprisonment penalty. Janet's punishment would commence after a phone call, providing a sense of satisfaction and justice. Whatever it was in Janet's warped personality that led her to blatantly disrespect me was for someone else to determine. I no longer felt any compassion toward the woman I once loved with all my heart and soul. The impending retribution was of her own making. The police interviewed every member of the Calcas Realty Agency staff, gathering interesting but inconsistent statements. Janet faced multiple police interviews. Detective Lawrence Bacht questioned me about Robert Toldson, attempting to bait questions about a more than professional relationship between Robert and Janet. I affirmed my complete faith in my wife's fidelity, dismissing any doubt. He just smiled at me, perhaps pitying me as a poor betrayed man. The funeral service for Robert Toldson took place on Tuesday. That morning, I observed Janet wearing her somber black dress, the same one she had worn to my mother's funeral. She didn't inquire if I wanted to accompany her to Robert's funeral. Whatever thoughts she had regarding Robert's pass away, she kept to herself. Undoubtedly, she had much to ponder, including the homicide and her infidelity. Over the following week, Janet appeared eager to engage in a serious discussion about our relationship. However, my cold shoulder promptly halted her attempts. I had moved beyond any possibility of reconciliation or making amends. I held the power to end the charade whenever I chose. 3 weeks after Robert's homicide, police investigations seemed to lose momentum. No new leads emerged, and there were suggestions that Robert might have been executed by a loan shark or a bookie. During this period, Janet's mental state continued to decline, marked by increased absent-mindedness and confusion. Little things frightened her, yet I offered no assistance or solace, even witnessing her struggle. I thought to myself, too bad, as I observed her slowly unravel. Finally, on the subsequent Thursday, I placed the call to Carlos. The plan was already set, and he was eager to set it in motion. Janet had only hours left before her new life would begin. Friday morning, I left for work before Janet was dressed, deliberately avoiding a final encounter in my house. The sand in the hourglass had run out. Across the street from our house, a car with 2 men lay in wait. The kidnapping unfolded at a 4-way stop sign intersection, with vehicles in front and behind Janet's car preventing any escape. With the precision of a Delta Force team, 2 men acted swiftly. As the driver's door opened, a needle punctured her arm while the seatbelt was cut away. Janet was pushed into the passenger seat, and one of the men took the driver's seat. The 3 vehicles departed rapidly, the entire process lasting less than 30 seconds. No witnesses were present. At 11 o'clock that morning, in a branch bank on the east side of town, a woman made up to look exactly like Janet entered and handed a withdrawal slip for $25,000 from our joint account to the teller. She presented a driver's license and passport as proof of identity. The teller took a few minutes to issue the withdrawal in the form of a cashier's check. A guard escorted the woman to her car, noting the license plate as she drove away. The line at the American Airlines ticket counter was short. The Janet lookalike approached the counter, presented her photo ID and passport, and received the boarding pass. Flight reservations had been made online the previous night. The first leg of the journey was to JFK Airport, followed by a non-stop flight on number 951 to Rio de Janeiro. The Pittsburgh departure was at 4:45 in the afternoon, reaching JFK, New York. Subsequently, at 10:30 that evening, the American Airlines plane took off, carrying the passenger, Janet Canella, on an overnight flight to Brazil. I waited until noon on Saturday before contacting the police to report a missing person. Surprisingly, Detective Lawrence Bacht was the officer who arrived at the house to take the report. I informed him that Janet had not returned home at her usual time, Attempts to reach her on her cell phone were futile, as it displayed a non-in-service notification. When I contacted Amanda Stoccata, one of Janet's close friends at Calcus Realty, she revealed that Janet had not shown up for work the previous day and hadn't even called in to report her absence. Detective Backton made cryptic notes in his notepad, while occasionally glancing up at me. Eventually, he began questioning the state of my marriage, probing into potential problems that might be related to Janet's disappearance. I reiterated what I had told him after Robert Tolson's homicide investigation. Our marriage was fine, and I couldn't fathom any reason for Janet to voluntarily vanish. He then inquired if I had any involvement in foul play concerning Janet, to which I emphatically stated my love for my wife and my inability to damage her. Lying to the police was a skill I developed early in life, associating with the junior mafia, and it continued to serve me well. 3 days later, Detective Backton visited my office during business hours, presumably to assess the husband he was dealing with. Once in my office, he sat down and offered a tight-lipped smile. I wore a distressed husband's expression as I questioned him about any news regarding Janet's whereabouts. He responded, stating that they had retraced Janet's activities after she left my house on Friday morning, providing some information with a mix of positive and negative aspects. Several witnesses claimed to have seen her having coffee at Denny's restaurant on Bennett Street around 10 o'clock on Friday morning. Detective Backton informed me that Janet had appeared at the Allegheny National Bank around 11 o'clock, as captured on video surveillance. She made a $25,000 withdrawal from our joint savings account. As he shared this information, I expressed disbelief and questioned how it was possible, stating that Janet hadn't mentioned anything about wanting to withdraw money. Detective Backton assured me that the facts were clear, explaining that the cashier had made photocopies of Janet's driver's license and passport before issuing the cashier's check. He was confident that when I saw the surveillance tape, I would identify the person at the cashier's window as my wife, Janet. Once again, Detective Backton paused to gauge my reaction to his revelation. I expressed to the detective that I believed there must be some mistake, emphasizing that Janet and I discussed everything happening in our marriage. I maintained a bewildered look while staring back at the police detective, aware that he was saving the most devastating news for last, and I had to prepare for another acting performance. The detective went on to share the most disturbing news, stating that my wife had purchased airline tickets to New York and then to Rio de Janeiro. He mentioned that they located her car in the long-term parking lot at the airport, revealing that her flight left Pittsburgh on Friday afternoon at 4:45, and her flight to Rio left New York at 10:30. The detective informed me that they contacted the Rio de Janeiro police to locate Janet, but she seemed to have vanished once she arrived in Rio. Detective Backton now stared intently at me, awaiting my response. I exclaimed that it was madness and stated that Janet would never do something like that. I emphasized my belief in her love for me and mine for her, expressing that leaving the country was absurd. In an attempt to portray the betrayed husband, I began to cry right in front of the detective. There was a moment of silence in my office before the detective resumed talking. He asked if I believed this had any connection to the homicide of Robert Tolson. In response, I questioned how he could even ask that, asserting that my wife had no involvement in the homicide. I reminded him that she was interviewed and never charged in connection with that case. The detective clarified that they never charged my wife, but she was high on their suspect list. I responded to the detective's statement about others suggesting my wife and Mr. Tolson were romantically involved. Expressing disbelief, I asserted that it was absurd to accuse her of being linked to the Tolson homicide, emphasizing that more than office gossip was needed to support such a claim. My eyes bore into his as I challenged the credibility of the accusations. The detective explained that they were still investigating, and now that my wife was out of the country, suspicions about her role in the homicide had grown. He paused for a moment and shared that evidence at the crime scene indicated a carnal motive, with Tolson being tortured and thumped for hours before being strangled. In response, I emitted a small laugh, dismissing the idea that my petite wife could have committed such a crime. I questioned the detective's belief in her capability, stating that she could barely open a pickle jar, let alone strangle someone. I expressed frustration with the escalating and seemingly baseless accusations. I addressed Detective Backton, acknowledging that all the evidence thus far pointed to my wife's involvement, and he suggested she may have had assistance. Surprised, I questioned the possibility of being that other person before he could say more. He explained that they considered the possibility, but assured me that I had a solid alibi for the time of the homicide. However, his voice lacked conviction. I summarized the situation, expressing my disbelief that they believed my wife had left the country due to her involvement in a homicide and that I was a likely suspect in assisting her. Pausing to glare directly at him, I sought clarification, asking if I accurately summarized his statements. He sat there, assessing whether my indignation was genuine or not. Conveying a hint of scorn in my voice, I informed the detective that if there was nothing else, the meeting was over. Rising from my desk, I approached the closed door and opened it, signaling his departure. Dr. Backton got up from his chair and moved slowly to the door. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Cannella. I'll keep you informed about your wife's disappearance." He didn't extend his hand, and I didn't offer mine. After the detective left, I closed the door and settled back in my swivel chair. I was sure Dr. Backton's visit aimed to extract more information than provide substantial details about the two cases. I carefully pondered each statement and question, realizing he suspected my involvement. Yet my alibis were solid. I was playing poker the night Robert Toldson was executed, and I was in meetings all day the Friday when Janet went missing. It was Saturday morning, 2 weeks after Janet's disappearance. I hadn't heard from Carlos or Carmine. Janet's whereabouts and well-being remained unknown. At times I sensed being followed, morning commutes and evening returns. My actions were meticulously planned, from work to home, with grocery shopping on the way. Nothing suggested evasion or someone trying to conceal. Every other day, I called Detective Backton for updates on my missing wife, but he had no new information. The Brazilian police found no evidence of Janet after her arrival in Rio. Later that afternoon, I ordered a pizza from Domino's. While watching college football on TV, the doorbell rang, and the pizza delivery guy arrived with my hot pizza. I paid him and offered a couple of bucks as a tip. Upon opening the pizza box in the kitchen, I noticed an envelope on top. Opening it, I pulled out a sheet of paper with instructions for the next day. It directed me to dress for church and attend the 10 o'clock Mass at St. Peter S. The note further instructed me to slip out the side door on the east side of the church during communion, where a dark Ford Crown Victoria would be waiting outside. Holding the sheet, I understood that this would be a final meeting with Janet before Carlos shipped her out of the country. He had waited 2 weeks to ensure the well-documented COVID plan of Janet flying out of the country was all the evidence the police had to work on. Carlos set up an elaborate deception to mislead the investigation, establishing that Janet was alive when she boarded the plane to Rio. This prevented the police from making a circumstantial case against me, even though there was no body to be found. The bedroom was pitch black as I stared at the ceiling. This past month and a half had been a living nightmare for me after receiving that email. The chain of events reminded me that my ancestral roots would always bring out a dark side of my personality. Whenever I was disrespected by anyone, nature or nurture, there was no doubt in my mind where my dark side came from. St. Peter's is a large church, and the 10 o'clock Mass is highly attended by several hundred parishioners. It was easy to get lost in that crowd and spot if anyone was following me. If the police trailed me, they must have waited outside the church as the throng of people moved to the front of the church for communion. I quickly slipped out the side door. The dark Ford sedan was waiting with the motor running, and I got into the back seat as the car roared into the busy street. The trip took about 10 minutes before the big sedan pulled up in front of a large warehouse building. The driver never turned around, instructing me to enter the building through the side door. Inside the large empty building, there was an office area near the back, with light coming from several windows. As I approached, Carlos stepped out and walked toward me, marking our first face-to-face meeting. Carlos greeted me, mentioning that Carmine said it was all right to call me JC. We shook hands, and Carlos, with a stoic expression, warned me about Janet's changed condition, hinting that seeing her might be distressing. I expressed that I was past caring about her appearance or what she had gone through since they took her, and I walked toward the open door. Stopping at the door, I inquired if she was on medications now. Carlos replied that she wasn't, but admitted she probably wished she were. He claimed to have kept her clean and very conscious all the time, asserting that she was now a broken woman and well-trained for her new life. We both entered a well-lit room where Janet was tied to a chair in the center. I circled her, standing directly in front. Despite being inches apart, she remained silent, her gaze beyond my shoulder, lacking the sparkle and vitality in her eyes. I addressed Janet, expressing that for the rest of her life, she would remember bringing misery upon herself. I recounted enduring her mood swings and cold attitude, emphasizing that her infidelity and the disrespect she and her lover showed were intolerable. I asserted that she would spend the rest of her life paying for her infidelity, mentioning that Robert had already paid his debt to me. Speaking slowly, I wanted her to understand that it was me who brought her and her lover to justice. Despite having once loved her, I conveyed my current loathing towards her. I informed her that Carlos assured me she would be well taken care of where she was being sent, as good care as they provide for their best horses and cattle. I stood for a moment longer, observing a tear forming in Janet's eye. It was the only acknowledgement I received before turning and walking out. The Ford sedan returned me to St. Peter S., where I went inside. As the 11 o'clock Mass ended, I left the church and drove straight home. A hard knot inside my gut needed drowning with some Jim Beam. It's been 3 years since I last saw Janet. I've almost forgotten her completely, with no traces in my life. I sold the house we lived in at her disappearance. Dr. Bacton's cases are now in the cold case file. I spend more time with Carmine at the Sweet Kitty Cat Lounge. I've sampled all the offerings of that sweet young stripper on more than one occasion. Marriage is out of the question. My 5 years with Janet convinced me that women are more trouble than they are worth once you marry them. My parents were right about regretting my involvement with Janet. Children should listen to their parents' advice, though they rarely do. I later found out Amanda Stoccata sent me the email. She was Robert Tolson's lover before he dumped her for Janet. I never thanked her for the email, nor did I discover how she obtained those photos of Robert and Janet. I guess she got her revenge the same time I did. There's something written about the wrath of a woman scorned.